6:01 p.m. and I'm calling to order the Town Council meeting on January 20th, 2026. This is a study session for 3 different items. The first item is item 2026-34, the Erie Community Center Building Addition and Renovation Pre-Design Concept Presentation and Summary Report. And with that, I'll turn it over to Luke Bollinger.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Luke Bollinger, Director of Parks and Recreation. And before I flip it to Rachel and Chad, who've done all the work on this project, I just wanted to put us back in the mindset. If you recall, last September when we adopted our playbook, our Parks and Recreation Strategic Plan, I kept making that reference of that upside down pyramid where you have your overarching goals and then you're getting down into the action items. So tonight, what we're doing is we've done this already. We've established our goals, and now we're getting down into that implementation stage. So that's what you're gonna see a representation of that, specifically as it applies to this project. But I just wanted to put us back in that mindset. Investment in parks and recreation facilities is really no longer a want or a need. It's an essential service. Physical health, social connections, the simple opportunity to participate in a program, economic value are all benefits of investment in parks and recreation facilities. Every meeting that we have, every design charrette, every survey is intentional community building in parks and recreation. So over the past 2 years, when we've been living up here, we've been planning to make sure that we can continue to provide recreational services that our community has come to expect. So through our 2024 Parks and Rec Community Survey, through the data that we collected in our playbook, we know that it's projects like this that our community wants us to pursue. And so as we continue discussions with you all, with the community about this project and the second community campus, it's important to remember that building community happens at a system-wide level, a system-wide lens, not just within a specific project. So that's the approach that we take when we present information to you all and to the public. So with that, I will turn it over to Chad and Rachel.
All right, thanks, Luke, for that intro. So today we're here to talk about the Erie Community Center Renovation Expansion Study. And this study really started in earnest back in July of 2025. That was due to budget that was requested in 24 to study the ECC expansion. And that was following up on the facilities master plan that was completed back in 2021 that kind of identified the need for additional space. And I'll get into that a little bit more as we go forward. But just to start, Luke mentioned Rachel and I have been working on this with Collab Architects, and welcome, Chris. I want to introduce Jordan Lochner with Collab, and then also Chris Kostelic. I know that Brian's here with us tonight, but that's the kind of architecture team that's been helping us with this study. A lot of staff involved, and Rachel will kind of go into that as we go forward. But that's been the team so far. And just to kind of talk about our agenda for today, we're going to talk about the current state of the ECC. And when I say ECC, obviously Erie Community Center, I'll say that out of the gate. But we'll talk about the conceptual study that we've completed to look at the feasibility of expansion and renovation of the current ECC. We'll also talk about the objectives of this presentation. We'll talk through the pre-design process. Again, I mentioned a lot of staff input from a design advisory team, and then also ad hoc members of the town staff and actually members of the community. We'll talk about some recommendations born out of that study for expansion and renovation of the current facilities. And obviously we'll have some costs, and I want to preface again to Luke's point, we start out here, we're at the conceptual stage. There's a lot of variables that go into this, a lot to work through still. So these are recommendations based on this current study, and we'll have some costs to present that are very high level at this point. We'll also talk about additional opportunity for expansion that was identified through the course of this study. And then we'll talk about some next steps for this process that staff sees as next steps. So I'm going to go ahead and read this. I don't typically read off the slides, but I am going to read this because it's important, building off of what Luke said. Erie Community Center has become an integral part of daily life for residents in Erie, providing a place for all ages to connect, play, and grow. The ECC embodies the town's investment in community vitality. The facility was constructed when the town's population was a third of what it is today, however, and has reached the point where programs and services have a higher demand than available space. Enhancements to programs, facilities, and support spaces are needed to ensure the community center remains a vital and vibrant resource to the public. So I think the keys there that we'll talk about are just the population growth, and as a function of that, to continue to provide these services at a high level, and some enhancements to the facilities that are needed. Excuse me.
Yeah, and I think the two things I'd like to just add to that, we track all of our participation, of usage of the community center, and in 2025, we had almost 1,500 people waitlisted for our programs. So I think that just speaks a little bit to kind of the higher demand and the space available. Also, in the enhanced facility component, I just wanted to share that we did defer some ECC CIP improvement projects in the 2026 budget. I think Luke shared that at the budget meetings. And so once we started this study, we thought, you know what, let's take a time out, let's take a step back, let's look at all of it and go from there. So it's always still on top of mind. But thanks. Okay, this one's me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, just in case not everyone is super oriented with the community center and what our use and spaces are, I was just gonna come up here and point everything out to the group. So first, this is the community center, and down is north, spatially. So if you are looking at these green spaces right here, those are actually our 3 community rooms plus our stage, which we kind of makes a small meeting space, plus our kitchen. If you go over to this blue space here, that is our Columbine Lounge. And for those that aren't familiar, that's our, it's a free space for our active adults to connect and have coffee and do different activities together. Straight across from that are our 2 bathrooms. If you go a little bit up that purple space, the first one is our kids station. And so kids station is our drop-in paid child watch program. So when caregivers are working out in the rec center, or maybe even having a little bit of respite in the lobby, our staff can watch the kiddos ages 6 months to 6 years. That little kind of round thing behind it, that's the outdoor playground. If you go the next little purple space, that's our mini minors area. So that's a free indoor playground that's completely open to the public. Because our Kids Station program is so popular, often, I want to say almost Monday through Friday in the mornings between about 9 to 11, we close down mini minors so our Kids Station kiddos have access to it because that program is so popular, which is a wonderful option, but what that does is it takes away a free amenity to the public. So if you can imagine a mom with a 3-year-old, it's a cold day, it's snowy, her 3-year-old needs to burn off some energy. She comes to the rec center at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday, she can't access mini minors. So the orange space, yep, right across from the purple, like right there. That is our cycle garage, and then right above that is our staff offices. There's our lobby, our big blue box off over here. Yep, perfect. That is our pool. And then you can kind of see our front desk space, and that is also our break room and some our lifeguard office. Just above that is our party room. And then the spaces above that would be our cabanas and our locker rooms. And across the hallway, that is our gymnasium. And then above our gymnasium, in kind of the same, that little tan, in the orange color would be our fitness studio, and in the tan color are our 2 racquetball courts. And then further up is where our climbing wall is. And then this graphic is our 2nd floor. So that orange space is where our weight room is. And then it's not quite shown, but then of course there's a track that goes all around on the upstairs. So that's just a little bit of information about the community center in case that everyone was familiar.
All right, so reasons for this current ECC facility study. I mentioned in that paragraph when we started, just the need for space. And that is a follow-up on findings and recommendations from that 2021 Facilities Master Plan. And they were building deficiencies identified and facilities improvements related to that to serve the higher demand for programs and services and improve the visitor experience. So it's really spaces to accommodate that growth and demand for services.
Yes, and then also want to share some key takeaways from our recent Parks, Recreation, Open Space and Trails strategic plan update, which of course we're calling our playbook. And so as part of that process, we had a really, really robust community engagement plan. I know Luke presented on it back in August, but as a quick reminder, it included a community questionnaire. It included interviews with focus groups and with stakeholder groups, and one of our focus groups was specific to the ECC, users of the ECC. And then we had an open house, and then we were, of course, at multiple events collecting all this information. And one of the key takeaways that we heard over and over and over again was expanded recreation spaces. And so that's part of our summary report that our consultants put together for us. And then also within the community questionnaire, one of the questions that we asked was, what are some barriers to recreation? What's preventing you from using our services? And common answers are things like, it costs too much, or it's an inconvenient day or time, or I don't feel safe or welcome there. And our number one response that we got, the number one barrier, was programs fill up too quickly. Which as a recreation professional is a smidge heartbreaking. I do have to share just one comment. In the community engagement, or in the community questionnaire, we had an open-ended comments that people could write in. This person, I'm just gonna read it so I don't misquote it. She wrote, "Current facilities are nowhere near adequate for the demand upon them. Signing up for youth sports is like trying to buy Taylor Swift tickets, only worse."
They should not be laughing at that. That is really bad.
Yeah, and PSA youth sports registration does open tomorrow at 7 a.m. if anybody has kiddos.
Get that on right at 7 or 6:59.
Exactly. Yeah. No. It's exactly. So I just thought that was a pretty telling comment. And then also in the community questionnaire, we did ask about most desired programs and services, and fitness and wellness was definitely at the top of that list. So wanted to share that. And then as far as our playbook recommendations, we have a whole section on parks and recreation facilities. And the top two, the first one is plan for future community recreation spaces. And the second one is revitalize and expand the Erie Community Center. So again, straight from our playbook. Oh, the next one's me too. So I thought this would be pretty interesting to share as well. In 2024, we were approved for 3 new FTEs, or 3 new full-time staff. And with that, we had the amazing opportunity to kind of fill in some gaps in service that we had. So we were able to kind of expand our services. And that included therapeutic recreation, which is recreation for people with disabilities, along with any sort of inclusion support services that we need to provide. The second one was we were able to kick off our Erie Youth for Change Team Committee. Thank you, Councilor Bear. And then also that provided an opportunity to expand our teen programming. We do like teen trips now and teen volunteer days. And then finally, we were able to kick off our cultural arts program. So now we have a cultural arts supervisor, and she oversees and runs our cultural art events like Shakespeare in the Parking Lot. And then she also oversees our public art program, which I believe we're coming back next month to share more information with you. So it was so wonderful, but that's 3 new staff coming in 2024, and I thought, I don't know where I'm going to put everybody. And so Luke and I made the decision that I would leave the community center to provide space for my new staff. And so I actually work out of the Schofield Farmhouse. And then we also put the new cultural arts supervisor out there with me as well so that we could or provide some desk space for the new staff. And then finally, at the bottom, couple bullet points here. Again, I know everyone knows the town of Erie is growing, but we wanted to point out that in 2006 is when the ECC was designed. You know, we're about just over 14,000 residents. Today, we're about at 40,000 residents, and of those residents, 45% of households in Erie have children. So I thought that was a pretty interesting statistic to share or bring to light.
Oops.
Oh, that's me again. Oh. And so, I think that especially as staff, we've known for a while that we've needed more recreation spaces. And then going through our playbook process and all the community engagement, now we know that expansion of the recreation services and spaces is supported by the community. And finally, through this study, now we know it's possible. And honestly, I think of the group, I was the biggest skeptic. I think I was the one where I was like, I don't know. I was.
You can pretend to have been a skeptic.
Yeah. But now we know it's possible, which is exciting. So from there, I'll turn it over to
Yeah,
Chad.
we will get into the limitations and how we arrived at the options we did in a bit. But this study summary report provides an update to council. So that's what we're here for on our pre-design efforts. We've gone through what we feel is a very thorough process. And we're going to present the building addition and renovation concepts for you tonight and those conceptual budgets. So again, I bold print, put conceptual in there. That's where we're at. That's the stage we're at right now. And then staff will seek direction from council to further develop those concepts into construction documents. And so we're just kind of summarizing where we're going, which is a request for council to provide direction on that. And that'll really allow us to sharpen our cost estimates. As we said, this is very conceptual. We've got our expert partners in Collab who's worked with an estimator to put together these budgets, but it is still based on a conceptual design, nothing in detailed design. So that's when you really get to sharpen the pencils and arrive at a budget. I wanted to share this graphic as building on kind of Luke's pyramid theme. This is just kind of where we're at. If you see up at the top there at that light green level, that's where we started, which was the facility strategic plan, and then the PROS update, which was last year. So the strategic plan was back in 2020, 2021. The current stage we're at is that pre-design conceptual stage. Where we're going is take that pre-construction and develop it into construction documents to really, again, refine the scope of the project because we have made some assumptions and you really get into the details when you go through design. And then, again, arrive at that more refined project budget. So that would be the next step, and that would be the better part of a year worth of design when you think about an expansion of the rec center. And Rachel really pointed out it's a revitalization too. So we're not just looking at an addition, we're looking at the existing space primarily on the A side. I say A side, and it's all those areas to the north of the lobby that Rachel described, but also some fitness areas and other areas, again, in that opportunity level that we've kind of mentioned that we discovered are possible. I'm going to kind of turn over to Collab now a little bit to talk through our process because they really led, town staff had a tremendous amount of input. It was staff driven, but also led by Collab and helped to organize this process. I'll let them kind of talk through that process.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. Great to meet everybody. My name's Jordan Lochner. I'm the founding principal at Collab. This is Chris Kostelik. He's our recreation specialist. And we approach this process in three major phases that you'll hear us talk about throughout the presentation: discovery, vision development, and then the developing of the design concepts and kind of that final vision and budget. I think it's really important in the discovery phase. One of our staples that we really try to stick to is there's no substitute for due diligence. And I think that's what this graphic's kind of showing. So I'm just gonna quickly walk up and kind of explain what's going on with this graphic a little bit. It is a lot of colors, a lot of lines. Just to orient everybody, Rachel mentioned the 3 kind of meeting rooms on the north side. This is the north side of the current ECC. And I think when we started the project, everybody's assumption was the easiest way to grow would have been right to the north, right into that field that you guys see. Beautiful lawn space right there. Very quickly on in our discovery process, we were doing our due diligence and realized there's a reason that the building shaped the way it is. Everything you see in this kind of red right here is the mining. And this is the dedicated setback in this orange that kind of facilitates. This is the site we're talking about here for the ECC, and these are the property lines and adjacent site for the library, just to orient everybody. So really quickly on, you can see as we went through the discovery process and did our due diligence not only on what was our opportunities and constraints were, but also working with the staff through a variety of exercises, understanding the needs and wants. We were able to create this graphic that kind of identified site constraints, but really the site opportunities and how it related to the existing facilities. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I know there's a lot going on with this graphic. It was really helpful for us as we were going through the process of due diligence, understanding what we could and couldn't do. But I just think it's really important to kind of identify that. Then going through discovery, we'll just kind of go to the next slide here. We did a variety of exercises to help us gather a lot of that information of wants, needs. We did everything from architectural tours. We had a dedicated engineering tour of the facility to look at existing systems, the facility. What you see here is our SWOT analysis. I'll just do a quick high level and then I'll turn it over to Rachel to go into more depth. But we did everything from staff interviews, SWOT analysis, design storytelling, to really kind of gather a lot of that information to help us as we program and to really identify the need for this facility. But Rachel, if you want to.
You know, right as this project kicked off, we had kind of wrapped up our community engagement for the playbook, and so all of that was given to Collab for review. So we really wanted to make sure we involved the staff, got their perspectives, their input, and it wasn't, it was definitely, you know, recreation staff, part-time and full-time, but then we also met with our sustainability team, and of course, facilities, Chad and his team, planning, building, and IT. So again, we got lots of staff involved. And at one of the first kickoff meetings, Collab facilitated a SWOT analysis. And so that's what you're seeing on this slide here. I'm just gonna read one from each area, not the whole thing, but a couple that I thought I would pull out. For our strengths of the ECC, a strong community hub, family-oriented, welcoming, and serves all ages. A weakness, misses programming for the 7 to 10 age group. And I don't necessarily mean missing programming as in like sports activities. We mean like specific to the ECC. You age out of Kid Station at 6, but then you can't be independent in the rec center until you're older, about 12. And so there's kind of this little, you know, gap that we're missing that we really want to try to program towards. Opportunities, again, the second one down, expanding youth, adult, and senior programming, sport, after-school activities, mentoring, food. Food's written down there because of our senior lunch program, and we're about at capacity for our senior lunch, and it'll be a sad day, the day that we have to turn somebody away. So I'm gonna try to avoid that. And threats, site challenges. So again, the undermining, the aging infrastructures. We just turned 18 years old not too long ago at the community center. So it's almost a 20-year-old building, which is crazy. Moving on to the next slide. I thought it'd be fun to pull out some of the staff interviews. So these are direct quotes from staff facilitated by Collab's. Oh, did that go? Okay. Facilitated by Collab's interviews. The couple there at the bottom on the left-hand side, There's no room for additional equipment. Overflow equipment is currently on the track, and they're talking about fitness equipment. So if you've been to the ECC recently and you walk the track, on the south side of the track, you're just gonna see all fitness equipment along that space to provide, and in the corners, we get these little pockets of equipment in the corners as well. One bubble up, personal trainers have difficulty finding space to train their clients. So then we start to talk about, okay, maybe we don't take any more personal training clients if we can't give them a good experience and have enough space to do the training. And then one up from there, again, need something for the immediate or intermediate age, when they are too old for Kids Station, but too young to be independent in the rec center. So again, this is all kind of staff perspective. We're there every day, we live it every day. There's a couple things that we've identified. And before we move to the next slide, I just wanted to touch on that design storytelling process. So Collab facilitated it, and it was with staff and with patrons. And we're all in a room together, and basically we were asked to think of the ECC as a person. And what's important to that person? What are those person's values? What do they bring to the community? And it was a really fun process. And we imagine the ECC as Greta. She is a beloved community member. She's welcoming, she's caring, she was the town mayor at one point. Greta was the town mayor.
She survived?
I think so.
18 years ago.
Yeah. And so it was a really, just a different way to do community engagement, not the dots on on pictures. And for me, just sitting in the room, it was really fun to hear it and to hear that perspective and just understand how special of a place the ECC is to the community. So that was a really fun process. In your summary report, the visual of it is on page 18 and 19. So. Okay, so now then from all of that, so all the community engagement, the staff interviews, all the research, right, that Collab is putting together, some themes kind of started to emerge of what we really needed at the community center. And the first one is flexible meeting space for rentals and programs. I'm not sure if you've ever been to a meeting at the ECC in one of those community rooms and you have karate on one side of you and you have dance on the other side of you and you're trying to have a meeting, and we just maximize those spaces as much as possible. I ran a quick report, and in a 3-month period we had 435 bookings, and in 2025 we had to turn away 99 rentals. So again, those spaces get used a lot. The next bullet point, enhanced circulation, visibility, and access control. So that's actually specific to the front desk. Because people can come to the front desk from a couple different angles, it's easy to be in a conversation with a patron and helping them, and people can get in pretty easily. So again, if we could maybe enhance that so it's a little bit more of that control, that access control. The third bullet point, enlarge youth activity areas. So with mini minors, as I mentioned, when we're using it for Kids Station, we've taken away that amenity to the public. And so in this process, I just kind of wondered, is there a way for us to reimagine mini minors where it can be open to the public and let our Kids Station kiddos and staff use it? So those were some things that we chatted through. Expand and improve fitness and gymnasium areas. So our fitness spaces are pretty much at capacity. Our fitness programs are close to capacity. And our gymnasium, we don't even have enough room for our own programs. In our gymnasium, we use the schools, or we rely on the schools, but what's so ironic about that is that they are wildly unreliable. And so we are getting to this really tough space of this negative customer experience because we're suddenly moving, last minute practices. And as a parent who has lots of kiddos, that's not an ideal situation.
And this last bullet point really mentioned earlier, but it's all those spaces that are needing to grow or be enhanced or modified as a result of the growth of programs and the services. And all this is to improve the visitor's experience at the facility.
I just want to touch on one thing in here is that you see that administrative space in there. right? So yes, this does benefit the community because you need the people to come in and put on those excellent programs and services. So we're not expanding the staff space because we just need more spots. We need people to be able to come and feel comfortable and want to come to work to, put on the therapeutic recreation programs, to program basketball schedules, to run Camp Erie, which fills up in 37
And
seconds.
yeah, a minute,
So
yeah.
just wanted to highlight that one bullet there.
Thanks for
Thanks,
that.
Chad.
So I want to kind of give it to Collab to talk through this. They produced this graphic and kind of this breakdown, but this is what we're calling the targeted expansion and renovation of the ECC, and it primarily addresses the meeting spaces that we talked about, youth areas, yes, some fitness areas on a smaller scale, and increased staff areas. So, Chris, if you would.
Yeah, just as a preface to this, and I'll admit, this is probably the quietest this team's ever seen me. So now I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about the concept that we developed. Did anybody ever watch the show House? You ever watch that where you're diagnosing some complex? That's sort of how this project felt to me, that we're looking at this building in this sort of strategic, sort of almost surgical way. It's not just replacing things like for like and saying, let's make this thing better. It was almost a shell game. So there's a little bit of complexity, but I'm gonna try to walk you through that a little bit here. So talking about these meeting spaces, obviously we have the existing meeting space with the stage area here. And if you remember that site diagram, we're very much limited in this building to essentially the boundaries. So we were able to sort of nestle one additional meeting space into the west. But we thought if we put additional meeting space out here, what's the first thing we do? We take away the windows from the Columbine room, which is pretty critical to a beautiful sort of adult space. So we decided that the Columbine room really wanted to move to the exterior, so that it got windows and a more view of the entry to the building, and then recapture this space for meetings. So we really were able to develop about 2,100 additional square feet for those gathering spaces. And again, those aren't just meetings and rentals, that's day camp, that's youth programs, it's sort of the lifeblood of this building at the community center. So that kind of targeted that need for those spaces. Then you got to those youth areas. One of the challenges is it's sort of landlocked. We looked at saying, well, what if youth moved to different areas of the building? But it still made sense to be here. So what we really decided made sense was to push this space out, expand mini minors, but subdivide it in a way that you could have this space open to patrons while Kids Station is using that playground. So we were able to sort of solve that. It didn't add a ton of square footage, but it kind of unlocked a lot of new programming. Third, we looked at increased fitness, and this was probably the biggest challenge in the building. It's everywhere, and I mean everywhere. It's down the lobby, it's in the cycle garage, it's, as Rachel said, all along the track. One of the first things we said was circulation doesn't really work very well, so we improved the circulation and access control by moving the desk. That allowed us to create a more direct circulation path and really think about fitness in a different way, flipping that in the lobby. We were able to capture space on both the lower level for a group exercise studio and on the upper level, bridging out over that two-story space on the way to the climbing to create about another 1,400 square feet of usable group exercise and fitness space. We did capture that cycle garage for staff space because it's in a really remote space relative to the rest of fitness. So it didn't make a lot of sense to leave it where it was. And so the net increase of fitness is about 1,400 square feet, but it's very purposeful space. It's really useful for the variety of fitness that's happening in that building. And then finally, the staff areas. And that was another one we had to sort of unlock. We were able to expand the area in here by pushing the desk out into the lobby. Again, as Rachel said, kind of improving that access control scenario, but capturing that space in here. In addition to the existing staff space, that's where we added this chunk of space here to capture a large training and meeting space, a dedicated break room that isn't sitting amongst 10 staff members, additional workstations with some daylight, access to the senior area now that they didn't have before, so they kind of moved between those functions. So again, a total of about 3,120 square feet of increased staff area. So that totaled basically a little over 7,000 square feet of improved, additional, more functional, and more programmatic recreational space. Did I miss anything?
No, but I will mention, so Chris talks about that lower level fitness space. That would be a conversion of one of the racquetball courts. So the very first racquetball court, that would be a conversion to a fitness space and then adding that platform up top.
You're killing me, you know that, right?
But there's still one there.
I don't play anymore, but it was a big deal when we built the rec center the first time.
And then I'll just walk you through briefly, one of the other big challenges of renovating and adding on to an existing building is doing it in a way that's sort of seamless so that the building doesn't feel like some, Mr. Potato Head of uses. And so you can see the existing character of the community center kind of has this sort of modern farmhouse flavor. And so this is representative of the addition, and we were able to kind of reorient the entry so it doesn't have this cross breeze that the staff complained about, but is also more directional to the entry rather than kind of tucked around the corner. And we were able to capture that additional space and sort of integrate it in a way that looks really seamless to the existing building and architectural character. I think there's one more here too, Chad, if I remember. Yeah, and so again, the front entry, a lot less space to work with, but you can see just by extending this ridge, we were able to easily capture that additional meeting room. And then by extending the peak from the entry, we were able to capture that expanded playground space with tall ceiling in a way that almost looks like it was meant to be part of the original design. So real seamless.
And so, these expansions and renovations obviously always have costs, and so the next
I'm gonna sit down for that.
cost is, and this is again, I'll let Collab talk through the details, but it's an opinion of probable cost based on these concepts. And the targeted expansion and renovation, when I talk about that, that's primarily those 8 side spaces that I mentioned, the meeting space, some staff space, the indoor play spaces, and some fitness spaces as we mentioned. Jordan, Chris, if you want to talk through some of this, you worked with your estimator to put this together, so.
Sure, I'll just point out a couple things that I think are really important. Number one, it was pretty serendipitous that the estimator that helped us complete this work happened to have been the original estimator for the original construction. So he knew this building inside and out, he knew all those little picadillos that were in this project, and so his assessment, I think, of the existing construction and new construction was particularly targeted. We weren't guessing at what was where and wondering if we could expand something. So I think the numbers are pretty representative of both the renovation and addition. So a little over $10.5 million was the total assessment of both the renovated space and the new additions. It was also really important to make sure that when we came into this building, there wasn't this distinct line where everything was brand spanking new and sort of tired and old. So we did consider how we might do a refresh through the existing building with maybe a little paint, flooring, some other things that would help kind of bridge that visual gap. We also included some escalation to mid-2028. That's about 2.5 years of escalation. So not just escalating it to when we intend to start construction, but as most bidders will look at, they bid through 50% of construction. So we wanted to make sure we didn't set you up for a situation where you underfunded a project right out of the gate. And then non-construction costs, all those things like design and engineering, equipment, all the development fees and all the other things that go into executing a project, we wanted to make sure we considered those as well. So a total price tag of right around $14.5 million, turnkey for the project to accomplish all those things that we just presented to you.
And again, this is at that very, if you remember the graphic of the pyramid, that kind of 20,000 foot view, if you will. This process that we mentioned that we'd like to get direction to move forward really narrows that down in scope. And so there's a lot of assumptions with this, and it is very high level at this point. It is you saw the pretty graphics and renderings, and that may lend thinking that it's farther along than it is, but it really is truly a conceptual level, and there's a lot of things that we'd have to work through to arrive at a final cost. But and so one of the things that we identified through this process that previously we thought, before the study, that expansion to the east was not possible due to an easement. So I'll let Rachel kind of talk about the need for a gym space, a fitness space, and the opportunity that we have that we didn't, when we started this, realize that we would have. So.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting to uncover that. It felt like we were pulling back an onion almost, and so once that we discovered that, it was pretty cool to think of all the possibilities, the programming, the revenue, not depending on the school so much. We even have after-hour rentals that we use our gym, and then just thinking about how busy our fitness spaces are. Probably one of the number one complaints I get or I receive is from individuals that are frustrated with how busy the weight room is, especially come about 3:34, because that's when a lot of our high schoolers want to come over and work out. And so we offer right now fitness in our gym. We offer it in the fitness studio, in the cycle garage, and in all 3 community rooms. That's where Silver Sneakers is, that's where yoga is. And so even kind of taking some of the pressure off those community rooms, coming up with this other fitness area, and then allowing those rooms to be available for programs and rentals. Again, just kind of a game changer. So we were excited about that.
Yeah, and these things are well known if you've been there to the ECC on a Saturday, or if you've tried to, I'll share this. I helped coach my 5th grade daughter's basketball team, and over the holidays we didn't have a gym to go to. So I thought, well, we'll go to the rec center and just try to grab a hoop. Well, everybody else had the same idea apparently on that night, and it was a little bit dangerous. We had high schoolers that just about took out some of our 5th grade girls. So there's just that demand for gym space, and I think that's in general with all the need and the demand for court space and fitness space. So, Chris, Jordan, do you have anything to add to this?
No, other than I think you identified this idea that this expansion in that direction initially wasn't something that we thought was feasible. And so once you sort of open up this opportunity to say, is there something that makes sense here? Again, it wasn't just a matter of what do we need to add? It's what makes sense, right? You wouldn't put offices in that area. You wouldn't put meeting rooms in that area. You'd put active uses that connect to the circulation network, which is why this idea made some sense.
Maybe you can walk us through the
Yeah, of course.
space.
And so that being said, obviously it was sort of a natural to say, I think one of the very first comments was from staff was, can we have a gym? And they kind of said, why? They were asking for, well, I don't know. But the idea here is that within that sort of footprint of allowable expansion, it is pretty easy to share storage, connect up the gyms, and really add that amenity fairly straightforward from a planning and construction standpoint. And then logically, if you have some fitness in this area and then group exercise in this area, it's sort of logical that expansion then leads to a small amount of fitness. And the nice thing is it has an exterior exposure with some glass and southern daylight. So it just seemed logical that if you're gonna eventually look at that potential expansion, these are the amenities that make the most sense there. Again, about 3,200 square feet of fitness, 7,000 square feet of gymnasium, for a total of about 10,000 square feet of active court and fitness uses.
And of course, the budget for that, what we're showing for gym and fitness expansion, all the things that they broke down are consistent with this estimate. You have your construction costs there, the escalation through mid-2028, the non-construction costs, and a total cost of $12.5 million. And here is another rendering of that from the east, southeast looking west. I'm sorry. Thank you. And so that shows that fitness area to the south, and then the gym expansion is that larger section that you see. And this is a breakdown of that square footage. Again, this is the gym and fitness expansion plus the, if you were to do both, it includes the A side, which is that the meeting space, the youth space, the staff space, the front entry areas that we mentioned. And so just to bring this to next steps, last part of our agenda. So town staff is requesting council direction for ECC expansion design. So the first bullet point there is direct town staff to bring to council a resolution awarding a professional services agreement for full design for the targeted expansion and renovation. That's that first option that we looked at. The estimated cost for that effort, the professional service agreement is around $920,000. The second bullet point there, same professional services agreement, but with both the target expansion and renovation and the gym and fitness expansion. And so the total estimated cost for that effort would be $1.7 million. The next bullet point there is to determine the funding mechanism for the project. There's been options thrown around for other CIPs, and so this obviously would require voter approval and some debt issuance, and so that's part of this conversation is some direction, at least to start the conversation and continue the conversation on the funding mechanism for this. And with that, we'll take any questions and continue our discussion.
All right, great, we're study session format, so we can just all kind of chime in. That's one of the advantages of this. I'll start maybe just because the original rec center is near and dear to my heart, because I spent a lot of political time when I was mayor 20 years ago, and the racquetball courts were a debatable item. I think we moved past that to pickleball as we were players here, so it's certainly not a big deal to me now. Couple questions. So in the original design, on the side of the building, there was supposed to be art on there, and it never has been there. So if you drive by on Erie Parkway and look to the rec center to your north, there's lights that are on the blank wall there. So is that in the plan now or ever to actually use maybe some of the art energy to do something on the rec center?
Yeah, that is something that we identified in our public art and placemaking plan as an opportunity, because we realized that. I think without having a formal public art plan, a public art and placemaking plan, that just never came to fruition. So that is something that Taylor has in her 5-year art plan.
Yeah, we've hired like a subject matter expert on public art. I'm really excited for our presentation in February. She would be thrilled to,
Perfect. I'll
yes.
hold further discussions on
Okay.
that until February. The second one is, why did you not go into the future town building space? I've been aware that that's been there for a long time, and it's like no one has ever really had a plan or usage. It seems like it's adjacent to this. Was that considered? And if not, why not?
Well, so I can speak to that a little bit. I think that's one of those items that we identified in our deep dive, which established a no-build easement. That's one of the reasons why there was an easement shown between that.
Can you bring the slide up? It was early on in the deck. Slide 8. Yeah, there you go. And so there's an easement by whom?
So I'll let you guys, we did a pretty deep study on this, but.
It's an interesting one.
Well,
Anytime you build a building, I'll give you a very, very quick primer on building code. In order to
Just
build
keep
a
it
larger
really-
building,
I don't want to go too much
you
detail.
have to
only
keep
'cause
a
the-
halo around that building that says no one can ever build close to this building.
Okay,
Because the PUD said there's a future town building here on your own property, the town essentially self-imposed an easement that said, well, if we ever build another building, we may forget we were supposed to have that easement buffer. So the town's building department essentially imposed that buffer to say, if you ever build a new building, you gotta make sure you maintain this buffer. So to answer the question, if you expand the building into that zone, that buffer isn't necessary anymore. There's no reason to buffer against your own building. So yes, expansion to that area is feasible. We in this plan took it as far as we thought was reasonable, but there's nothing saying you couldn't build a little further into that area.
yeah, and as council, could we not amend the PUD?
You absolutely can, and that's kind of what we're proposing, is to say, take this self-imposed easement off of yourselves, expand your own building into your own land, and you no longer have to, normally you build up close to a property line and the halo is essentially it's assumed. When it's your own property within your own planned development, you kind of created your own situation, so that's.
Is that where the other gym is that you're talking about? Okay, I did not make that connection.
So we are, I'm sorry if that wasn't clear, we
Yeah,
are
okay.
expanding into that area with that particular amenity.
And that's that larger green box you see over the blue line right there. So,
Well, the
that is-
gym,
that
the
is
gym
the
is the
future.
green?
yep, so that's directly adjacent to your existing gymnasium. So this is the gymnasium and fitness addition, that was part of that opportunity that we discussed.
Okay, so my question still stands then, all the space further to the east,
You can use that.
right? And if we're gonna do this, do we do it once and we do it with whatever the programming needs?
And the blue is all the easement,
The blue was the existing self-imposed easement that we can obviously, you
so
guys.
you could build in there as well.
Yes. I think a key piece, and we didn't want there to be too many colors on this graphic, roughly 60 feet from a property line is what this building needs to stay off of. So if we were to draw again, I'll stand up here real quick. If you were to do a 60-foot adjacent diagram, that is where your building would have to remain off of the property line.
So that dash border is essentially what you're allowed to build into.
Okay, so,
Yes.
so there is more space to build,
There
is
is.
what I'm hearing. And then my next question is, can you go up? Can you go into a third story, if you needed to? Right, I get the undermining, you can't go out very easily,
you
but could you
could.
go up?
The existing building would have to have been structured for that demand, and because you have a lot of long span spaces, those don't tend to do very well going up, right, long spans. And then every other space in the building that's not a long span, i.e. the gym and the pool, is a peaked roof. So it would essentially mean tearing off those existing roofs and expanding up where it would require more circulation, stairs, elevators, and so forth. So it's probably the most expensive way to capture space on this site, but anything's possible. But it is challenging, these big buildings, because they're not like an office building where they're just a bunch of flat plates and you can just keep kind of stacking them up like a house of cards. The way this building is constructed, it's probably the least desirable or most challenging way to do it. That's just a simple answer.
All right, and then my last question is really about timing for this. I think when the study was started, there wasn't discussion about a second rec center. As we did the community survey last year, I think it became clear to all of us that there is support for another multi-use facility. And I'm specifically using multi-use facility because there wasn't support for, say, a performing arts center, but that doesn't mean we couldn't incorporate some of those features into another building. And so I'm hesitant, at least myself personally, doing any kind of direction or approval now until we can do the second survey that is on its way to test the voters' will. And then since we need funding for this, I'm guessing, but I don't know, I'd spoken to Patrick a little bit about this, but can we test, what is your appetite to fund an expansion of the ECC? What's your appetite to build a new second facility? What's your appetite to do both? If we get approval for or more support for doing the new facility, can we not do what we're talking about here and just build it all into the second facility? I think these are all open questions in my own mind that I hesitate to give direction to move forward on this. There's also what I believe is a political concern. If we were to move forward on this, some people would likely see that as saying, well, this is all we need, and we'd lose the opportunity to move down the path of doing a second facility, which I believe we need as we go to from 40,000 to 85-ish thousand people. All right,
Yeah, Mayor, that's a great point, and yes, we can test a number of different options, and I think we're gonna talk about that here in a little bit, but, you know, I think from all the data that we did, all the conversations that we had, the 2024 Parks and Recreation Community Survey, the ECC expansion alone cannot meet Erie's recreational needs. The second community campus, which includes some indoor facility, we're not just gonna rubber stamp the ECC now and put it at the 25-acre Collier site. That alone cannot serve Erie's recreational needs. So I think we're thinking about, again, that system-wide vision of
Macro
how do
view.
they complement each other in the long term so that you're forever meeting or closer to forever meeting Erie's recreational needs. And then I think the second site, and we'll get into more of this conversation later, presents some opportunities for some of those partnerships that Rachel and I have been talking about over the past probably 18 months.
And I think the polling work that we need to do would help us figure out what is the voters' appetite for funding one, both, only another.
And from a timing perspective, by moving forward with design documents and then construction documents, that if you do see that the community is supporting one or both, then you're that closer to actually putting shovels in the ground, and your costs are more accurate. If you wait, I think Chad, you said it's gonna be a year process for construction documents.
You
And
guys
then you
know
risk-
that I don't buy into that. Hey, you gotta do it now, rush, rush, rush. Because I fundamentally believe that if we ask our voters, do you want both? Do you wanna build just the new one? It will guide us here. And, if it takes a little bit of time to figure out what to do right for the long term, at least me, as one vote, that's what I feel like we should do. Because it could be, they say, the current rec center is great if you're gonna build a new one to help offload. Because I'm assuming the new one would have a gym and all
Well,
that stuff.
and I think that's where we have to be careful. We can't assume anything, because we haven't done that. We haven't done that feasibility study today. That contract for that consultant will come to you in the second meeting in February. So I think we have to be careful about over-promising and under-delivering.
Totally.
And when you're talking about a multi-purpose center, I think if you try to throw too much in one type of facility, your multi-purpose becomes not personal at all, not purposeful.
I think one of the things we discussed too in this study was, first of all, going back to the need is there now for additional gym space and things like that. So that's been there for a long time. I think there was the conversation we had about, okay, if a new second site becomes a reality, then we didn't want the new site and the old rec center, so some revitalization, I mentioned revitalization, that was part of that conversation was how do you preserve this cherished resource really for the build out, and how does it evolve and still accommodate all the needs that are there now, and then with the accelerator, the additional growth, so that it doesn't become the old rec center.
Totally.
Yeah.
Go ahead, this study session, so we can all jump in without, I don't have to
I didn't
recognize
want
you.
to cut off your train of thought.
yeah,
You
no,
were
I'm
still
done.
going. So,
Yeah, thanks.
so yeah, I'm one of those moms that recognizes that competitive sport sign up is a competitive sport. I overslept a few years ago and we missed a soccer season. So devastating. But so I see what you're saying about like, the expansion is necessary to serve the community. I'm curious, something else that keeps coming to my mind was, I don't remember which presentation it was, Luke, but talking about when we have these bright, shiny new facilities, then it's the operations and maintenance, so we don't have that old rec center situation. And so does this cost estimate and everything take into account the kind of the old part of the rec center? I know we had a leak in the lounge. And we had to replace a lot of the roofing after the hailstorm. So I'm just curious if we're able to make the updates and upgrades to the existing building along with investing in the new, roof and expansions and all the fun new stuff.
I think the presentation is what I said, today's capital is tomorrow's maintenance. So I think I'll probably let maybe Chad or maybe Jordan and Chris talk about, kind of the upgrades. But yes, I think that's what the conversations that we're going to have maybe here this evening on how do we make sure that we're funding continuous operations and maintenance for Erie's recreational facilities. So that is something that we want to talk with council about on the next topic. You guys want to speak to maybe some of the concerns about the existing building?
I guess I would just say, to that point, we had leakage on the A side in the Columbine Lounge area. The A side roof, when I keep saying the A side, but that northern portion has all been completely replaced, and since then we've not had any leaks to my knowledge. On the south side, you have the gym space, the pool space. That's a completely different roofing system. I think we're gonna continuously evaluate that and do ongoing maintenance. And that's one thing that I would note that that from whether it's the master plan that was done, the strategic plan back in 2020, the overwhelming comment is that the facility's in good shape, right? We've maintained it well. There are some the things we're looking at outside of this project to upgrade mechanical systems and, just aging equipment that we need to replace. So that's all planned for. And then as part of this capital project, that's one of the importance of arriving at a budget that we can sharpen our pencils with. You would build in some of that operation and maintenance costs ongoing, just to show the total cost of this project and then ongoing maintenance required. So that was a lot, but there's several layers to that onion and some things that we're doing now and some things that we've got planned in the near future. And then through this project, there's an opportunity to kind of look at some of those issues that we can tackle through a renovation and expansion. So.
And then in our COP discussion, I don't know who I'm asking this question to, but we, address the undermining, and I think we were talking about the courts. Are those improvements included in this, or is that a separate thing?
No, those are completely separate projects. So the mine mitigation that we're looking at as part of the town center project really involves this area here next to County Line Road and Erie Parkway. The reason that we're looking at the undermining in that area because to mitigate. Should you stay up here? To mitigate all of this would be an astronomical cost, as you all well know.
Mm-hmm.
To mitigate this area for hardcore services, which we know we have a need in the community right now, and pickleball and tennis love, well, I don't want to put those two in the same group. Pickleball love that community aspect of that. So expanding court spaces in this area is something that we're targeting in a future capital improvement
But a
project.
totally separate project.
Totally separate,
not
correct.
this. Okay,
This is just the Erie Community Center.
just the building.
Just the building, yes.
Does it make sense to keep those projects separate? I'm curious, just why would we not do it all together? I'm not.
You could absolutely. I think our next discussion is kind of, how many do you fold in?
Right.
Right, we see that, and we'll talk about that in the next, but we see a lot of different projects kind of folding into one ask if that's what the community wants.
So just so everybody knows who may be listening to this tape afterwards or listening live tonight, what Luke's referring to as the next item, it is ballot issue planning. And that discussion is basically testing the waters for our community on what they're willing to potentially tax themselves for to do. I'm kind of with Emily on this one, that I would like to do it all, if possible. But obviously we need to see if our community is in that same mindset.
And kind of on that note, the plans for this, is it big enough? I mean, how much time does it buy us before we need this second community center, right? I know there's already, grew so much over the last, 15, 20 years. Does this get us that takes care of us today, or does this get us to take care of us for 10 years from now? Are we making the roads wide enough for today's traffic, or are we, planning for, the next 10 years?
I wouldn't put a 10 years,
Yeah,
15
I
years,
know.
20 years. I think expanding the building, the way it is, I mean, you're restricted on how far you can expand. I think if we were to dig down a little bit deeper and say, hey, based on our user numbers and our population and our programs and services, you could do a phased out expansion if you had more room to do it. But that's why we're looking at a second community campus, because what does that need to look like, and how does that campus complement what we have here? So I can't give you a 10 or 15 year answer, because it would just because we're so constrained by the site itself.
Kind of, on the next topic, right? What does the community have an appetite for? Maybe they have an appetite to expand this, but not quite wanna be taxed to do this like community, so can we build into those blue areas and if we, you know, on this project, if it comes back that, you know, that we might get one shot at this and it might be a while before we can build the second one, right? You know, we don't know that yet, right? But it's gonna be yes or no, right? So.
Luke, do you mind if I jump in real quick? I hate to steal any thunder, but I want to put my recreation professional cap on for 2 seconds. You know, one of the things, and I'm just putting this out there to kind of frame the conversation, I don't know if it'll help or not, but one of the big topics of conversation in this study was not looking at these two potential centers as just duplicating the same things, right? We know that. Most communities that have a full service center, like the community center, when they do grow into a second center, completely different complexion, right? So I guess what I'm trying to get at is expanding this doesn't necessarily preclude some of those other amenities being duplicated or even new amenities coming online. This facility has a drop-in complexion. It's the kind of facility people just come to, jump in and play. A new facility might be more program-driven, it might be more league-driven, it might be more generated by things that are scheduled, and this one then stays that drop-in, reliable, I can always go here, like Chad said, and find a hoop. The next one, it's gonna be maybe leagues and tournaments. So to answer that question, it's not about how much or when, it's sort of saying, treat this building the way it sort of lives and treat its paternal twin the way it wants to live and see those as sort of complementary to each other. I don't know if that helps the conversation, but I keep feeling like there's this thinking that we're just growing more of the same things, and in reality, it's treat this as something that's always there and reliable as dropped in, whereas a new facility might have a little more of a programmatic complexion. And then you say, okay, now they're kind of synchronized as opposed to saying, well, we've kind of kicked this one to the curb and nobody uses this. That's not how I see it. And I hope that maybe kind of frames the conversation differently.
I mean, I agree, we want it all, right?
Yeah.
But we also have a police station to pay for, we have public, we have a Leon Rural facility that we need to pay for, you know, parking, right? So we've got a lot of other things to pay for, so, you know, if by expanding this project a little bit, right, does it save us some time for another big project, you know, another big campus somewhere else? Does it buy us some time?
Yeah. But it might not be
because, like,
wasted effort is what I was suggesting. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it's
No,
not saying, put it here instead of, it's treated differently, right?
On the flip side, though, if you knew that we had support from the community to do a big second facility, I mean, isn't it possible that maybe you take a function, I don't know, it's the senior group, right? And you create a better space for the seniors at the second one, freeing up space in here. So now you can do, you know, your workouts and your private sessions on that you don't have room for today, right? That's why they're linked in my head.
They're literally like this, if you go forward, they very much are.
So that's why I want to get to the next topic to see whether we have support to ask the right questions.
Well, I did have a question about the, I know there's like, maybe, I don't know, this is too in the weeds, but there's grant funding available for building decarbonization, for solar, for that kind of stuff. I wonder if we could help offset the costs are we looking at that, like how we kind of leverage those CEO grants and Dr. Fogg grants and things like that to maybe help with some of, you know, addressing the aging infrastructure in this building.
And we are actually looking at that. So not with this project necessarily, because this looks at the whole facility, but building electrification is something we're studying. You know, to make it a more resilient center or a reliable center, I would say. So some backup power generation, and then replacing aging infrastructure. Our rooftop units, the mechanical units are at the end of life. Really, we're still able to maintain them, but we have that. We've had that as a project forecasted that we would replace those mechanical units. And there may be grant funding, and we're actually starting the conversation. It's good timing. We reached out to the Colorado Energy Office, and you know, we've been successful for other grants in the past, and so that's we would target some of those similar grants.
That's great. And my last comment is about the senior lunch program that Councilmember Hoback and I get to go to every week. Yeah, we are dreading the day that we're gonna have to say we're full, which I think 108 is our limit, and we've had 104 pretty consistently. So, and I'm looking at one of the slides, what number is this? This is 13, and looking at where we have senior lunch in that kitchen window I look at when I do dishes. And just thinking about if we have the space to expand would be amazing, but then we're gonna need a second dishwasher, and we'll probably need to double the size of that trash facility that's right outside the door and that kind of stuff. So I'm just thinking through the logistics of it, because we do want it all, but maybe it does make sense to have that eye to the future that says our seniors are gonna need their own, half of a building someday or whatever, so. Anyway, and just knowing that our 65 and up population is set to triple by 2040, so we can only expect those numbers to go up, so.
So I just had a couple questions on some of the projected cost. So can you maybe explain if I'm calculating this correct, for the target expansion renovations, it's coming back a little bit over 2,000 square foot versus the gym expansion looks like it's only like a little over 1,200
Yeah,
square foot. Can you?
part of those numbers, without sort of parsing the whole, because we did look at each of the areas of impact as a separate sort of small estimate. What you're seeing in that first number is not just the added area that totals to 7,000 square feet, but all of those little surgical modifications that allow us to expand the desk or expand the offices. So it's not that it's more expensive, it's that it's not necessarily in the area total summarizing the impact of the work. So it's significantly more area you're touching. So without sort of going through the whole estimate, it's hard to point out that all those costs tally addition, renovation, modification, all these other pieces. So the cost per foot doesn't quite equate area to cost in that first.
Okay, yeah.
The second project is really new construction, X amount of square feet costs X amount of money. And we have pretty good data on that, having worked on 2 or 3 gymnasium expansion projects in the region in the last couple of years, so we sort of know what that.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing is sort of a little complexity in the number that isn't clear based on the area.
So I guess, sorry, I don't want to poke holes in this because I appreciate all the work that did on this, but I guess to the mayor's point of the extra area that we have
Yeah.
that we could expand into, would there be better cost benefit per dollar if we looked at something like that?
It
rather
probably
than-
is, and frankly, that question about going up,
Yeah.
that fitness could be a 2-story fitness space. You could really leverage that. And to your observation, you get a little bit more bang for your buck if it's just clean, new, simple construction on, virgin ground than going in and doing, because if you think about it, they have to shut down, they have to do work, then they have to vacate that work and do the new work. I don't have to explain to you what a kitchen remodel looks like, but
Yeah,
that's the
Okay,
challenge,
makes
right?
sense, yep.
Yeah, hopefully that answers the
I think part
question.
of our discussion on that note was about maintaining adjacencies too. So what makes sense to be, for example, are you gonna relocate everything in the A side and reconfigure that for fitness, or is it gonna be?
Sure,
Well,
yeah,
Rachel will talk a little bit more about those adjacencies, but yeah.
yep, makes sense.
Yeah, kind of keeping the fitness spaces all together in one space, keeping so if you go down to the A side where those community rooms are, those were designed to, the person who's coming in doesn't need to pay to use those spaces. They're there to be for a rental, or they paid for a karate class and they go down, they paid for a dance class and go down. Whereas the other side of the building is you pay to drop in and use the facility.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the design setup of, that we tried to maintain.
Yeah, so that is that's limiting how you can locate things.
Right.
Like you can't put a lot of non-paid stuff on the
Yeah,
east
yeah,
side,
okay.
right? That's the challenge.
That leads into something I was thinking of. Get a lot of bang for our buck for that expanded area, and it's area that undeniably will get used. Another gym, more fitness area. I'm not saying the other won't. But when I look at the dollars per square foot, I have a hard time prioritizing more meeting space. I know it'll get used, but sometimes I think a lot of meeting space there. And maybe we can do more of a staged process, do an expansion, and also with an eye to the future. We don't necessarily know exactly what our future is going to look like. We don't know exactly what our demographics are going to be. We're aging, and maybe the families that are going to stay here are aging, and maybe won't meet as many children. We don't know, but we can buy ourselves some time and maybe not put so much into the renovation as we do to the new facilities, and then in a few years, after a couple more surveys and whatnot, we'll know more what the residents want, and we bought ourselves some times, and you know, maybe there'll be something besides pickleball that's a fad, you know? So,
Maybe racquetball will come back.
maybe, but we gotta keep those pickleball projects separate, because that has to happen first.
My knees can
So what is the current source of funding now? Do we have to go to the voters for this one?
Yeah, we'll have to issue, we'll likely have to issue debt for a project of this size. I think the facility impact fund, the general fund, mixture of those wouldn't fully support a project of this size.
Not the construction and design.
Yeah, were you asking design or construction? 'Cause
Construction.
design, yeah.
Okay.
So yes, to explain.
All right, any other questions? I'm just cognizant of the time and we have a pretty meaty topic next.
So right now on, you know, a couple estimates for, the concept project and whatnot moving forward, that's currently not in the 2026 budget, right? So if we did it, we'd have to do a supplemental or?
No, and Chad, correct me if I'm wrong here, but for design and engineering services, we do have that in the 2026 budget.
Okay.
What we're after tonight is, do you want staff to bring back a professional services amendment for one or the other or both? I think one or the other or both options
And I would
as a
say,
professional services agreement.
I'd say at
amendment.
least tonight, we probably don't have enough information. Goes partially back to what I said earlier, what Councilmember Hoback said. I think we need to get to the point and ask the voters where they're willing to spend their money. And then we'll be in a better position to give direction there.
So regarding this, I use the facility quite a bit years ago when I was a stay-at-home dad, and you know the kids' space fills up, and there's a lot of times when the fitness area is pretty crowded. I mean, really, I kind of feel if we're going to expand, it would be to go for the additional court, the additional fitness area. I hesitate to give direction tonight, as others have expressed, because of the funding. But I was wondering about, we're doing the undermining for pickleball courts. What about parking? How is that factoring into this? If this facility is going to be expanded, what are we doing with possibly expanding the parking where the pickleball courts were going to possibly be?
It's a good question. It's one of the things we looked at. You add area by code, you're supposed to add parking. Fortunately, there was an addition of parking, considerable addition to the south end of the parking lot. And from our calculations, the facility by code is overparked.
Yeah, okay.
It's not to say that if you go there on a busy Wednesday evening, it's not tough to get a spot, but by code, it's overparked. So that would be something we'd have to decide, do we feel we need more? But from a code standpoint and sort of a due diligence standpoint, you said we're adding X amount of area, and you had X amount of capacity in your lot. So it's use versus code. Ask a user that can't find a parking spot, they may not care about code.
Well, then we can support it with multimodal investments and.
Most communities aren't going towards over parking, municipal buildings. That's not the trend, right? So that's a good point.
Yeah, we'll know more about RTD in another year or two, and the B will inform us greatly on how many people are willing to ride it, and so.
Underpass, right, on county line, so.
So council, what I'm hearing right now is that we're in a holding pattern right now with a professional services amendment until we have more information. Can you help me understand a little bit what additional information that you might be after as it relates to this this project?
Yeah, I think it's the macro view of the new facility as it relates to this facility and what the appetite from our community is to raise their taxes. By the way, if anybody's listening, we're not talking property taxes here. I think what we're gonna discuss in the next item is sales tax, where we do have a little bit of headroom. So I don't wanna freak anybody out up there that we're heading down a property tax increase, because we're not.
So I'm of the opinion that we should be gathering this information alongside of those intentions so that we have the information to give our community. I don't think that's wrong to be able to say, here's what we're considering, instead of just keeping it so wide open. Having choices makes sense to me, that they would be able to say.
The big thing from my perspective is just that I just have concerns about the amount of money that we're, for the renovated portion of the point we were making before, that we're spending an awful lot of money to renovate that area. And I think if we can reconfigure it in a way to sort of maximize our dollar for what we get back, I think that is probably gonna be important for the residents to consider in any tax measures, so. I think.
Can you expand on what is awful lot? Like how do you decide?
Well, from what I was saying before, like for the meeting center expansion, you're paying about $2,000 a square foot versus on the gym expansion, you're paying $1,200 a square
For that, he
foot.
said like it's already there and you're looking at
Yep.
revitalizing it. It's not like a piece of dirt and you're starting, so those costs will always be different, right?
But actually, this is the other way
Yeah.
around. The new dirt's cheaper, the new
Yes,
build is
yeah.
cheaper.
Which is correct, but we
Yeah.
don't have the plan for the new dirt, right? It
No.
could be 20, 35 or
It's-
45.
Yeah,
It's whatever we got here.
the expanded gym facilities, which, yeah, I
Oh,
think
you're
that's.
saying just these additional base?
Yeah, basically going
The
by what they
office
did for
buildings,
that,
office.
yeah.
And it really is a limitation of where we're at right now with this high, I think conceptual, is that we don't get to that level of detail of cost. And so that would be, that effort of going through full design.
Yeah, I get that. And when we go to the voters task for the tax increase, we actually won't have it down to that level either, right? So I think there's a big question in front of us, right? We did the survey last year. It said that people were highly interested. I think it came out number one in the survey. It wasn't one, it was number two. And it said we're interested in a multi-use facility. Well, what is that multi-use facility? The next item is gonna get clarity on what we as a council would like to see tested for, right? As far as on the next survey that goes out. And time's ticking, right? Because we are, I think, at least I'm under the impression we're gonna try for this coming election. I hope I'm not the only one in that vote, which means we have to move pretty quick. So if there's any delay here or putting it on hold, it's not gonna be a long delay. It'll be long enough to get the survey results back to help guide us on where the energies should be.
And just, I think, just to reiterate, and that, yes, that's true, is that when you do ask the vote, right, you have to have an amount in mind in order to build the facility, right? And we know right now conceptually what that is, and theoretically we'll know conceptually what a second community campus is. I think as best as we can fine tune numbers, that's why we're presenting this information.
Sure, that's fine.
So if we don't do it this year, then yes, we could absolutely continue to find costs. And that doesn't happen until you have construction documents and you have a contractor on board that's actually gonna be building the facility. So just wanna reiterate that point, that we're just fine tuning costs. We're getting to that low point in the pyramid.
Yep, I hear you.
So I'm hearing direction as, let's go to the next item and maybe we'll get more information from that one to fully resolve this one. But the next item is critical on what we'll pull on.
Yeah, I doubt we'll get enough information because it's the information from the poll that I'm talking about, not the information just from the conversation in the next item. The conversation in the next item will help us understand what we'll be polling for and what information we can expect back from the poll. Which we haven't had that conversation, so I don't know what that is at this point.
But it'll also give us an idea of the timing when we'll have that feedback.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Okay, so at this point, we're on hold for this one until we decide until we get polling information.
At least through my lens, and I mean,
I would like to move forward with some designs so that we can go to the voters with something a little bit more concrete. And I think waiting for another poll is just spending more time and getting us closer to the deadline where we've got to cram something through. I'd like to move forward with design.
understood.
So one last question is that how much is the demand and how bad are we? You gave some numbers, but does it make sense to get something started and it might carry along for 1 or 2 or 3 years? I know you said we can't put any number.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Smurley, there was a cough back here and I missed. What was your question? What's the cost of the?
It's not about just the cost. How well can we serve with this arrangement versus waiting for, like a survey and then a bond and like that doesn't even have, even the survey doesn't have any fixed amount. Can we tell them like 30 million or 10 million? Because without that, the survey is also not worth it, right?
Right, I think, as our population, albeit a little bit slower than usual, continues to grow, I think those wait lists grows. Right, so until we see that growth flatline, and that's how many people we have on basketball wait lists and, sharing swimming lanes and, all these different things, I think that number will only continue to climb. And as we introduce new programs and we introduce new services based on our goals that we establish in the playbook, because our community wants them, you're just gonna see that continuous kind of strain on the existing facilities, which is why we're presenting all this information now before it gets to the point where we're not able to provide the level of service that our community has come to expect. Did that answer your question?
It does. Like I'm just thinking between two things. One is I don't know when the new one will be there.
Right.
And it's not definitive, and there is so many things. One is a survey. What if they don't accept that or approve that?
Right.
So I'm thinking let's provide the services now, like with this expansion and like fulfill the demand. And we have.
I like to say that I feel like this expansion solves yesterday's problem. And so, yeah.
Also feature.
Absolutely.
growth.
Yeah, so getting some of those numbers dialed in.
Without a design of some sort, we don't know what we're gonna ask the voters for, how much.
And I would also offer, if the desire then is in 2026 to make that ask, again, the timeline of design, we would be looking at a full year really realistically in design.
And another thing I have is the more we delay it, that 12 million will be like 15 or 16 million.
Yep.
And we will be delaying services, the cost of it will increase. We'll still be like solving yesterday's problem.
All right, I get it, and I also understand that we're talking months here to figure out what our voters are willing to do. If the voters come back and say, listen, we get this other rec center expansion, but we don't want to do that, we want to do the big one, that's sending us in a different direction. If they say, forget the big one, just fix the old one to bring us up to, that's a different thing. We don't have any of that information today.
But
The point that Councilmember Hoback made earlier, I'm surprised you've kind of flipped the other way when you were saying, well, hold it, if we do the big one, we may not need to do something on this one until our population.
That's not at all what I
ages.
said.
Okay,
I
please.
said we should stage this one, go ahead with the expansion, defer the renovation until maybe we know a little bit better about how this plays out, and then decide what we need in any renovation versus the new one or combined.
So this is the renovation. I mean, it's expansion and renovation.
They're separate.
You should
We had a
refer to
presentation for renovation and we had a presentation for expansion.
Yeah, the two.
And I'm saying, let's look at staging it and going ahead with the expansion and defer the renovation.
And also one more thing is the new one will just be complementary and it's not like replication of the same services here and there, right? So,
Unless it's not. That was
so
what
when you build that one, it's complementing what is over here and it'll be some entirely new thing that he said could be different kind of services and this will be just like drop in and do so. You can always provision that differently, right?
Right, but the point that we discussed earlier, if you take functions out of the current one and you move them to the new one, then it is different. And so I take that to heart, right? I want you guys to be able to look at everything once the voters have been able to give us. Now, if the majority of people here want to just spend on this, I believe it will put at risk the ability to get the second rec center, because I think some people will look at that and go, they've taken care of the problem. Every dime we pump into it, you know, as you guys all know, I look at all these problems through three lenses: technical, political, and cultural. And we're talking about technical is what you're talking about tonight. Technically, we can tell what it's going to cost. Culturally, I think it's more about the programs and, oops, I didn't wake up in time, so what's the culture of this and how does that impact it? Positive for doing this, for that. But then you have the political side, and I have to try to navigate with council. How do you get the voters to approve a tax increase? And anything that we're doing to say it's okay, because we haven't looked at the whole thing, it puts that at risk. It just does. And I get the pressure to do something now, but I also believe it's
the whole thing changes, it's gonna change. Maybe we should just wait till we're 80,000 people, then we'll build one. I mean,
that's crazy talk.
So,
well, it is, but
okay, taking a step back,
so it's,
because I think I was thinking somewhat along the lines of what you were, and that was with the expansion portion, just the gymnasium portion. If we went ahead with that and then deferred am I summarizing this correctly? And then deferring the renovation portion, because that you're paying a very high price to get not a lot of square footage return, and but that alleviates some problems, not all the problems, but alleviates some of the problems with maybe, you know, pickup basketball leagues, those types of things that we see a lot of demand. But could still talk to, in the big picture, you know, I agree with you, the second facility, I think, especially in terms of what you're doing programmatically at the current facility, that could very much change, so.
I get it, but I also, to the point made earlier, I don't want a beautiful part of the current rec center expansion and then what did you guys call it? It wasn't run down, but it was some other term you used. We're talking in months here, right?
Okay.
We're not talking years and years and years. If we want to do this, I fundamentally believe we're going to put at risk the vote for raising taxes. I fundamentally believe that. It is a fine line that any of us walk when you're asking the voters to raise their taxes.
Yeah, but how do you think, or why do you think the voters want to raise their taxes who are on fixed income? Do you think this new facility will?
That's a philosophical question I cannot answer, but what
So you're assuming that they're willing and be ready to raise
I'm not
taxes?
assuming
for that?
anything.
I think he's saying
I'm
he doesn't want
asking for the
us, so he wants
survey
the
results
information.
to help guide us. I'm not assuming anything. Anyway, you know where I feel. If you guys want to move forward in this, I think you will put at risk the bigger question and bigger picture.
And for me, the next conversation will tell me when we'll get the results from the survey. What I want to understand is kind of the appetite, because if there isn't an appetite, is there an appetite for expansion here, but we won't have enough money to do a second place? Maybe we do more here now to buy us time till we can get the money for the second center, right? Or if they'd rather have the second center and not increase or expand this one. But I kind of like our ECC and I, but that's up to the voters. So that's kind of where I am. I want to understand when we'll have the results of the survey and to, if there's not gonna be enough money for a second place, maybe we can make this one bigger than what the current proposal.
I
John,
think
I
all
have a
these
question.
decisions will still be made this year.
I have one question on that one. So in the survey for the second ECC, do you know what amount you'll put in there, or you'll just ask, do you want a second ECC?
This will be the next agenda topic.
In that we'll discuss like how much it's going to cost. Don't they have to do the analysis of how much it will cost to put it on that one?
Yeah.
And that will be in months. You assume it will be done in months.
So this is the next agenda item.
And then we'll be bringing a consultant contract for that study in February.
Okay.
And then that will be completed sometime this year, later this year.
Regarding just doing the basketball and the fitness room option, would that $12.5 million potentially increase if the option one isn't done because some of those costs are being shared between the two?
To answer, our analysis looked at those two projects as independent.
Okay.
It looked at the renovation project as being built over one sequential mobilization, not eight additional, not eight separate. So if that helps answer the question.
Yeah, just if the two are.
Yeah,
like
we
you said,
didn't
independent.
lump those in and say you get some benefit that commingles. It's
Okay.
project A, project B.
In theory, if we did them both, would we get the potential?
In theory, yes.
Okay.
If you asked me to quantify it, I would probably have to defer that comment. But
Well, for
yes,
the
the idea is
disruption-
that there probably is some benefit.
Yeah. Okay.
With the
We didn't
disruption
look
of
at
our community, it's probably better to do them all together, I'm guessing.
Yes, and not to complicate this issue, but it sounds to me like there is a very thoughtful survey that could be applied, because a lot of times these surveys tend to be somewhat open-ended. This is going to be very targeted toward ballot questions. Having worked with a lot of communities, dozens and dozens and dozens with these same questions, you can make one argument that one jeopardizes the other, which is a perfectly valid argument. I've been in plenty of communities that say, hey, you want a new center? Take care of your old center. So you could almost make an argument on any side of this. So asking the voters the question, probably not a bad idea, but
And we heard
it's not
both.
it's not my call.
And we heard both in 8.5 months. We engaged the community, so.
All right, we've been going an hour and 40 minutes. We still have 3 more topics tonight. We also have an executive session. So unless we have 4 people that don't want to move to the next topic and continue this topic, I'll keep us on this topic. All right, I'm not seeing people saying, yes, let's keep going on this. So we'll move to the next topic. We'll get through that. That may prompt us to bring this topic back up, either tonight or a future meeting. But let's first, thank you. A lot of good work, and I think this is hard decisions we're going to have to make because of the monetary side behind it. But we'll get there. All right, so we're going to move forward to the next agenda item, which is item 2026-62, which is the ballot issue planning. And I think Lucy, you're going to stay up here. Our deputy town manager, Melissa, is going to join us. And I think Gabby, our communications director, is going to join us as well. I'm going to grab water real quick. Can you take over?
Oh, yeah, sure. I think we can go ahead and start. The mayor said he'd be back in a sec, so he's just getting water, so.
Okay, perfect. We can do that. Melissa and I are both on this topic tonight, so we can chat with you and get some clear direction about our 2026 and or 2027 ballot item issues, and we'll talk about that here in a second. I do want to acknowledge that we are 45 minutes or so past the time we're supposed to start this topic, so I'm going to try to get you to your discussion pretty quickly. I will start then with just the review of what I'm going to talk to you about today. First, we'll talk about the typical steps it takes to get an item to the ballot successfully, what that timeline usually looks like. We'll review the potential items that have come up over the last year that y'all have talked about and possibly said would be good on a ballot. We'll talk about a vendor who could do the surveying and polling of our community for a ballot item. You'll have a discussion, hopefully give us direction, and we'll move forward. So first I wanted to show a little bit of what it usually looks like to take an item to the ballot. There's a lot of steps to it to do this successfully. And I will say this is a typical timeline and the steps for something that is asking for money. There are a lot of other things that you can ask for on a ballot that are not necessarily money from the community. But when you're asking for money, in particular, either a tax increase to property taxes or sales taxes, usually we go through all of these steps. One example of a ballot item that we didn't necessarily need to go through all of these steps for was actually just last year when we asked about medical marijuana, marijuana sales tax. It was kind of a hypothetical, and we didn't have any marijuana businesses. We were kind of prepping for that, so it wasn't necessarily going to hit anyone's pocket. So there wasn't as much time needed or as many steps that we took to get that through. We had a pretty good sense it was going to pass from past community surveys. So just going high level here, we do usually do a feasibility study. So a lot of the facility related bonds and taxes that we'll be talking about probably should have a feasibility study in order to have the full information, in particular on financing, ready for the public so they can understand what it looks like. We do the kind of modeling of what their taxes would pay for, so we can be as clear and upfront with them as possible when they get their ballot item. They know what they're getting if they vote yes, so they know what they would give up if they vote no. Then we do the public opinion polls. So typically, if we can, we like to ask them twice the same sort of questions. We ask them once with basically no education out there in the public and see if they would support it, knowing whatever they happen to know in the moment. We would like to do a lot more education and outreach, which is the next step. And then you poll them again and say, okay, now that you know all of these things, now that we've talked to you for X amount of months, would you still vote the same way you did? Would you vote a different way? And then finally, you have to have your ballot language finalized. And in particular, if you're asking for taxes, you have to have very, very specific language that matches Tabor requirements for our ballots. And those are usually due about mid-August, mid to late August. So we can get a specific date on that. I think it actually might be August 9th, but I'll get a date. And then finally, like campaigning, which is something we cannot do as staff, elected officials can, and then some specialized committees, if they're formed, can also do the campaigning, but staff cannot do that after the ballot language is approved. So there's a lot of legal steps and a lot of best practice steps to a ballot item.
I thought we could not.
My understanding is that elected officials could campaign for an item.
Just not use.
We reflect the town, and the town cannot campaign.
Elected officials are treated differently. You cannot use town resources. You can't, so for instance, you can't print flyers here at town hall. You'd have to do that at home or a different arrangement. You can't use any town resources, but you are treated separately as an elected official than staff are for campaigning.
My highly paid position is.
I know you're making.
For a small failure of an item, so if it's barely losing, they say, okay, try again next year. 2 to 3 years for a larger failure, anywhere from 10 to 15% or higher. They say you really need to wait a longer period of time, or the public says, well, you didn't listen to me. I said no. So it is really important to not put an item on the ballot if you know that it does not have the support of your community. So that's why that education and outreach piece is so important. We did take nearly 2 full years for the home rule charter question, when we did exactly what I had mentioned there, that we did polling first with no education, and we saw they were close to support. Then we did a whole almost year of education, polled again, and then we had support. So you'll see here, if we could have, I would have started feasibility studies for anything that you're going to consider in November, and then done some polling starting in about February, March time, get results by May, do more education and outreach, and then right before August, you would poll again and make sure that there was the support you needed before making your decisions. So again, that's fast. I just want to get you to the actual discussion, but these slides are in your packet and we can certainly come back to them if you would like to. And now we're into your topics. So again, if you had looked through your packet ahead of time, you'll see that all of these items, I think there are 8 of them, are just things that have come up over the last year in your conversations and are potential items for a ballot that I think would be appropriate for a ballot question. So we want you to be able to talk about them. We did try to bundle them in like topic areas and categories. So these first ones are kind of bond measures, facility funding. So this is where you'll see the conversation you have already started this evening about a second community campus and an expansion to the Erie Community Center, as well as an expansion to our Leon A. Rural Service Center, which houses most of our public works and parks facility needs. And I'll come back to all these. Long-term revenue sources here. So we're talking about a tax that might last in perpetuity and not sunset. So this would be a permanent funding source for different items. So the first one here is an indoor recreation operations and maintenance tax. As you were talking about before, when you build something today, it becomes maintenance for tomorrow. This tax could help pay for all of that. Followed by a public facilities tax, which wouldn't necessarily be specifically targeted towards parks and recreation facilities, but could be any of our facilities. So that is a bit more flexible. It doesn't have to be project specific. So that's an option to consider. Transportation and infrastructure tax. You've had conversations about this as a possibility and or a fee. And so there's some links in here to some of the fees that were just recently approved in communities near us. So this one, again, we do have the opportunity to ask about a tax or there is a fee option here. And then finally, accommodation related taxes. Some of this is coming up specifically because Sundance is coming to our area, and so we do want to be prepared for that. Also in mind that Sundance will ideally be in the area for a very long time. So yes, we could be ready for the first one, but we certainly could be ready for the future. So there's a short-term rental tax option here, which could be on all of our short-term rentals that we have in Erie, of which we don't have a good grasp on how many that is. And then there could be a special licensing type just for Sundance or special events. And then a lodging tax that would be applied to hotels, of which obviously we don't have one now, but are planning for one at Town Center. So I wanted to lay those out for you first. I hope, like I said, hopefully you have looked at these and are familiar with all of them. We will go through discussions. And I think I have this a little out of order because I was going to talk to you about our survey option, our vendor options, but let's just wait for that and have you start your conversations about possible items. I do have staff members here. Obviously, Luke stayed, Julian's here. He can talk some about the lodging taxes and short-term rentals. Sarah's here. We have some specific questions about taxing and what that does for our finances. And of course, any other staff members can please talk about things as well. Melissa, anything else to add?
No, I think just really pay attention to the timeline and how quickly.
Year, the 2025 year that we just had the election for, many of our neighbors waited and didn't put items on there just because of the economic uncertainty. So we do expect quite a few items to be on 26. So just something to consider as the ballot gets longer, there is more fatigue and there may be less likelihood that all of our things are approved. So just another thing to consider when thinking 26 versus 27.
Do we have any sense on any of the special districts, whether it's Mountain View or St. Vrain that may be?
We're all taxed, but we got nothing up here. But they gotta go to the voters at some point.
So I'll open discussion from you. I am kind of hoping that you all will just ask questions and start to work this out. Yes.
Before we dive into the weeds of specific issues.
Yes.
Could you, it sounds like we are thinking possibly this year's election, which is gonna be a scramble and a half. Can you give us some guidance on the timeline items? Where we can crunch some of that time, where we cannot, where
Sure.
we must not?
Get their applications back in and then do interviews for possible vendors. which is something we can do if that's the direction you decide. So that's kind of the first decision point that we have from a timing perspective. If we go with which we used for your community survey last year. So Polco has not done these smaller surveys for us. They've stayed at kind of that higher level, large community scale surveys, but they do this for other communities. We just haven't asked them for it.
Yeah, Patrick reached out to me and he said we have money, I think, committed to them.
Mhm.
And so I don't have a problem using Polka.
So how can we not use Magellan?
No, they have indicated that they would not like to work with us on this project, but Polco says that they would.
Yeah, and I have a problem with Magellan too, and I'll keep it short here, but there was no language, I guess, in our contract on how they use AI. And when I questioned the usage of the AI, they would not meet, and they got standoffish on it. And I live in this space, and that's highly concerning.
Only you have that problem. I didn't have that. I checked the questionnaire. I work with AI in a very detailed, even I create language models.
I get it, man.
Yeah.
I get it.
So does Polco use AI?
I don't know, but we should have something in the language with Polco on if they use AI, how do they ensure that it's not hallucinating? And they should have some policy or something.
Yeah, so we've asked them that question and they did send us some really high level information to start with, of which we can do a deeper dive into specifically their AI policies. But I have already asked that question anticipating that it would come up. So I'll send you all of that information. I didn't want to overwhelm you with details if we weren't going to go that direction.
Yeah, so is anybody not okay with using Polka? Okay, I think we're okay on that first question.
Perfect. Okay, so if we're gonna assume we could start in February, then the timeline, then from that perspective, we'll go back to kind of a sample timeline. So let's say we will do some sort of surveying. I will say, if you decide to move forward with, for example, the second community center, we don't have the feasibility study results for that. So we will not be able to tell people specific numbers, which our polling company will tell us will not give us very clear direction.
Can we utilize other communities that have recently built a square footage rec center in the ballpark? Or are we like off hundreds of millions of dollars? I mean, what, are we talking about tens of millions that we're not quite sure? We're talking 50 million that we're not sure.
Well, I'll let Luke talk about it.
We're not sure.
Yeah, I think you could get in the realm of tens of millions of dollars off because we haven't done any sort of studying of the site. We haven't talked to our partners. Are they willing to contribute capital dollars towards it? Are we talking aquatics? Are we talking a field house? Again, this is a campus. This is not just a recreation center. It's 25 acres. So we're talking outdoor amenities, we're talking ball fields. So yeah, you run the risk of saying, oh, it's only gonna cost 25 million. Oh, guess what? It's 85.
And I will say from a PR perspective and purely a communications perspective, if we go out with minimal information, I'll say two things to that. One, I do want to just remind you that the option for a property tax is on the table. I think y'all need to please give me some direction if that isn't on the table, because those are two options that are possible. We could do a property tax increase or we could do a sales tax increase. And those are things we could also test with a survey and a poll. So I don't want to go into it assuming that there is only one option unless you have already decided that as a team here.
Yeah, the only reason why I say I'm not for it is because we have all these metro districts and the number one thing we get back from taxing, or at least what I hear, is that our property taxes are already too high. I recognize the town doesn't get that, but people don't differentiate that. They look at their property taxes and they go that it's big. We can test for that, but I think it also adds another level of complexity when I'd be really surprised if people came back and said, yeah, let's raise our property taxes.
And then just to pause, I brought Sarah up just to make sure we followed up on your first question. So Sarah, did you?
Yes, I just wanted to, in terms of calculating the tax rate that we would need to generate, the better number we have, the better timeline we can provide. So I think like, and I don't know how this works in ballot language in terms of when we would want to deliver something like this, but based on what we need to generate per year to get to whatever the end game is, and then whatever is actually in the ballot language in terms of, are we specifying a community center, or are we doing something as a general tax, will also determine whether or not how specific you need to get. If you're going with a generalized tax and you're just trying to generate a certain amount for public facilities or something like that, you can be a lot more broad about what the cost could be. But if you're talking about a facility that you need a timeline on, especially if you can't generate enough in the first or second year for the full cost, you're talking about 10% escalations year over year on that facility. So I would just caution to staying broad on the costs for individual projects. You want to be more specific with those in order to generate the right amount of tax. But if you're on a broader public facilities, police facilities, things like that, then you have more autonomy, I think, to kind of select what sales tax rate would make sense to generate. So I just want to differentiate between the two, because I think it's a little easier sometimes to hone in on how much you need to generate in order to get to whatever timeline you're trying to go forth with on a project.
And we've seen neighbors take that approach. I have a number of ballot items that are very specific in saying gym, multipurpose rooms, aquatics, fitness center. To Sarah's point, the more specific you are, you hone in on the cost, and that way the voters know what they're getting.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so around the sales tax increase, we have two different sales taxes, Weld County and Boulder County. There is some room right now on the Boulder County side for our sales tax to bump it up. Lafayette is higher than us, and there's a few other areas around us that are higher. But I guess it would be helpful to understand what we think we can increase it to and what that would generate, right?
Yes, so I can get that specific information if there is a dollar amount we're trying to target. So right now, I can't off the top of my head tell you how much it generates. And actually, we're waiting on our year-end numbers right now, so I'll have more information very shortly, hopefully. But with that said, yes, if we know we want to generate 15 million a year, we can, look at how much we collect and say, what would that, what would the gap be? How much would we need to add to the tax? And that would go on both Boulder and Weld County side. So Boulder, if you're on that side, would just pay slightly more because of their increased sales taxes. But yes, I think it has more to do with like, what are we trying to generate? And then we can kind of back into that number.
Currently, we're generating around 25 million sales tax?
Sounds I think sales alone is, want to say 22 to 25 kind of over the last few years. We've been increasing about 10% year over year, kind of depending on what's coming online, like King Soopers coming online and different ones, generating more sales tax.
Right. So I'm just thinking, an increase would probably only get us around 2.5 to 3 million a year, right?
Yeah, depending on what, percent. And again, that's something I could get into. I have to actually look at what that would mean in terms of generation, but yes.
I mean, this can go in so many different ways. What may be helpful, this may be totally throw it out, but what may be helpful is if we look to some communities around us that have built rec centers, say in the last 2 or 3 years, do your best judgment on roughly that's what we think we need here, and then back into the sales tax number, right? Because you'd have to bond for that. That would be, the payments would be based upon the sales tax.
Revenue bonds, yes.
And then that would help us understand, well, maybe the second rec center is totally out of reach because we can't raise sales tax enough to get there.
I mean, you're only talking a building when it's a campus.
Yeah.
Right, and so.
There's the maintenance for that.
Sure, and that's why I think we need at least something to start with, right? That what have others done?
This number
We
is a
have a
wrong
number.
calculation actually. Sorry, go ahead.
Finish your thought.
Yeah, I was saying, looking at somebody else's features and say that is the number and taking it to the voters is probably not a good idea.
You're missing some steps there. I'm just trying to get and understand, okay, let me throw a number out there. The rec center is gonna cost $75 million. I don't know if that's right or not.
You have a number.
Oh, I do?
Well, not on that, but on the expansion of the Erie. 27 million to do the court and everything.
Yeah, that's all in.
And actually, I just wanted to ask, in the slide, it said would benefit from long engagement. Isn't that already done or?
Well, I did see that. I think if we were talking about pushing this to 2027, I think that public engagement to better, look at that again from a public standpoint, to marry your point a little bit on both of these projects, if we were to delay for 2027.
And then you would get more public input to say, okay, this is what the second site would need. And then you basically have a better sense to
I think the
price it out.
second site's gonna be, it's gonna be a big project.
Yeah, that's
And I
why,
mean,
that's why it's through 75 million. I have no idea though.
It's.
Town of Timnath just passed a sales tax bond last November for 109,000 square foot center at $93 million.
Yeah.
And then they have some impact funds going into that as well. So to give you a rough number, 109,000 square foot at 93 million.
So
Okay.
we need to whittle this list down.
Yeah, although, yes.
I would say accommodations, I could right now easily take those two off.
Hold that for just 1 second. Yes, we need to get there. I'm almost thinking that if we delay this to 27, then let's go back to the last topic. Then, now I think I'm where Councilmember Hoback may be. Let's go all in on what we know. You build that. It gives us enough separation from the current center work. And then you work on that in 2027, 2028, 2029, whatever that may be.
That's a long-term project.
Yeah. And then we have the Leon A. World Service Center.
Agreed.
All right, well, I just gotta mull this over.
And we also talked about the tax to pay down the COP for the police station as well, right? So.
That's right, which isn't on here. We thought, should there be a public safety tax on here as well? So that when the chief needs to expand again, we've got money saved up.
But, in theory on that, since we can't pay it for 10 years, we can't pay it off for 10 years.
Yeah.
We could delay that one to like 28.
Yeah. Yeah, and
I mean, I'm in favor of paying it off as soon as we can, but we can't do it for 10 years.
so really you focus on the current rec center, doing as much as you can, put this off until you guys can do more work on whatever the bigger project.
The second community campus.
So, backing up 1 second, following up on what you said. So for a sales tax, is there a way to calculate, we've got like Broomfield right now is growing like crazy around Sheridan. Like, do we have estimates on, if there's extra dollars are being spent in King Super, some of our areas? I mean, we have.
Yeah, that's a hard one. It's definitely tough. Because naturally you would assume that the more homes and more traffic over there would influence, some of our tax generators over there. But I don't know enough about how many people are coming into that area to kind of understand that. I think that might be something we could maybe discuss with Broomfield, but again, we can't really share a lot of sales tax information.
Yeah.
So there's some limitations to what we can actually discuss. But yeah, I mean, I could definitely explore it, but I think it would probably be a lot of assumptions on my part.
And there's rumors of Whole Foods going out there, which then may.
Yeah,
so then there's cannibalization.
I'm
Yes.
sure there's enough demand that eventually there'll be another grocer, but, I mean, getting back a second to the property tax versus, sales tax, my thought with the sales tax is that, it does allow outside of Erie to pay into what we're doing rather than just putting it on the backs of the residents. And I feel like Erie for a long time, probably when the first rec center was built and you were mayor, and
We didn't have any
we
sales
didn't-
tax.
Yeah, we didn't, yeah, we were really relying on property tax, and I think, Erie residents have spent enough in other municipalities, like, it's time for them to help us out, so,
Plus, we didn't have a bunch of metro districts.
yeah.
The western side of Erie is, for the most part, metro district free, and that's changed now.
Whittling time?
Yeah, go for it.
For me, it's the lodging tax and the short-term rental tax. Just those seem that they could be pushed off a couple years.
Yeah.
So that we're not putting those on the ballot.
So what we're really putting, the focus needs to just be on money to expand the current rec center and to pay for the renovations.
That seems to be the closest project, if we wanna put that on 26.
And then
That seems to be
Gab's-
the closest project.
Yes, if you, dadgummit, we're gonna put something on the 26th ballot, that's the closest Parks and Rec project that we have that we could confidently communicate what we're doing, how we're doing it, how much is it gonna cost to the voters now.
Luke, should we go back though, and on that slide that had the blue and the future town building, should that be considered if we're gonna expand it and just put our focus in that?
We could, if we wanted Collab to start looking at that again, we could absolutely do that. I mean, we have a lot of the base knowledge, it's more of just putting a new building, right? The renovation, that project took so long because you're trying to move around pieces that are already set. Right, with the expansion, with the fitness facility and the gym, as Chris alluded to, those are new buildings. Right, so Collab could easily come back and say, okay, council give us some directions to add some onto the future town facility. All right, what does that look like programmatically? And, pop up 4 walls and a roof. I'm simplifying it, but yes, Collab could do that in a somewhat relatively quick manner.
Well, and I asked that because, what was the number? 104 seniors are now at the lunch and capacity is 108. I mean, do you build a senior wing? I don't wanna tell you, I want you guys to.
I mean, you got the numbers right up, got a third of our, by 2040.
2040, our 65 and up population will
It's
triple.
gonna triple. So, yeah, I mean, that should probably be part of the expansion, right? They're considered.
So instead of doing a targeted expansion, could you roll that under a public facilities tax?
You could. It would just have to, and then the council would have to prioritize, what are you gonna use those tax dollars for?
Yeah.
I think that's a harder ask of our voters though, if it's generic.
Right.
But it is and it isn't. We know of a project that there is support for.
Then why not just call that project out so you take the ambiguity out of the ask?
Cause then that sunsets, doesn't it?
I think you can do that in the language. I've seen it before where you prioritize the project. So like first, it shall be used for this, then used for this, and then used for maintenance and operations for the department or the general fund or general operations. I've seen it done that way. So Boulder had one like that they actually it was going to sunset and then they transitioned it into a general fund tax, which I was very surprised that it did that, but yes, but I'm not an expert on the ballot language that we would need in order to do that, but I have seen it.
Windsor and Timnath, this recent one from Timnath have both done that, where they ask for a certain amount of sales tax to pay the bond, the sales tax revenue bond, and then they leave 0.25% as a non-sunsetting sales tax to fund operations, maintenance, deferred maintenance.
But does that cause us to push off the second one for 15 years?
I thought, well, I guess it wouldn't be enough to probably fund the second one for a really long time.
For a long time, right?
Okay.
I mean,
Or do we count on increased sales tax to pay for the operations and we focus on the build? I mean, our sales tax are going up predictably at this point, right?
Yes.
And so is there enough headroom in the increased sales tax to cover operations?
I would have to look at that. We assumed 5% increase this year on sales tax, which is reduced from our previous year increases simply because we're expecting a little bit of an economic flattening. But yes, if you're increasing, 5% year over year, if we continue in that trend, that roughly keeps up with our cost of operations overall. So with the exception of some personnel. So broadly, yes, you could kind of do a little bit of a shell game there where, you said we're going to do a tax that would support the operations, maintenance operations for different properties, facilities. And then you would then look at what is freed up in your general fund in order to push that towards your CIP projects. You're still kind of utilizing the same funds, you're just doing it from different places with different purpose.
You're using them for a different purpose.
Yes, exactly. So, but you're dedicating those operating funds, which has downside as well, right? If you don't need all of them, they're now dedicated completely to your Parks and Rec, which I know Luke won't be upset about. But if we need some autonomy in spending, it might be a little difficult.
That's why, for simplicity, if we feel like we can handle the operations within our increased sales tax, I'd rather go to the voters very specifically. This is a sales tax to build the facility. And then we can always come back in future years for these other topics. I think people are they're more hesitant when operational things are tied into these taxes.
I will say it takes more education. That outreach piece definitely increases when it's not so straightforward as you will see this building that does this thing.
Exactly.
It definitely takes some more hand-holding to get the residents there.
When
And I
when
think
I was
it's
in
harder
Windsor
for
and
us
they were
to-
asking this question, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
When I was in Windsor and we asked those questions of the voters, we were very clear, and the ballot language isn't very clear, and I'm looking at Timnus right now. It very clearly states that once the bond is paid off, I'm using layman's term here, once the bond is paid off, this amount remains for operations and maintenance. So it has been done and as recently as last year.
And I just wanna mention, I know law's expansion is maybe not as appealing to voters, but I would couch public works as very bread and butter type of government. If you lose public works, that's a huge loss to the community. Even though they don't see it and they don't feel it as much as a rec center, street maintenance operations, all of those things, and the working conditions we have those employees in right now, I would not be a good leader if I told you they were good. They really need to be improved. People are on top of each other. And so that problem needs to be solved. It doesn't pull as well with the voters. It's a hard one, but I don't want you to forget that it needs to be taken care of. And we need to figure out that expansion sooner rather than later. Right now, we're looking at modular units just so they can sort of go to the bathroom and have some space. But it is a problem that's sort of right there. So as you think through making this decision, also think through then what would sort of be your guidance to staff on the Leon World Service Center long-term so that we can start kind of thinking about that as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, Melissa, and I'll use the example of Lafayette. I think in also last year, they funded, that was a property tax, so it was a $74 million bond that was renovate and expand the rec center, construct a new civic center, and renovate existing service center. So they had that situation where they bundled, right? They bundled all the projects together and then asked the voters, hey, with this one tax, do you want to fund all of these projects? So that is another option. I think that starts getting into more of the public facilities tax. But they were very specific in their ask of this is what you're going to get. And I think that goes back to Gabby's point of education in the community, which again, does that maybe say, well, actually, maybe we should be looking at this at 2027 so we can do that education, get the information back.
Yeah, it's like I either want to do it all, which is where I was at coming into this meeting, right? And if that means wait to 2027, then I'd want to wait on the expansion of our current center and try to get it all. I think the advantage Lafayette had was they don't have metro districts all over the place, and so a property tax was more palatable. Although they had a split council too, the mayor ended up casting the vote to go for all three. And it passed.
Right.
And so, I don't know.
They also have the highest sales tax in Boulder County.
Oh, so sales tax probably wasn't an option like it is for us.
Right.
We also have some of our property tax mill levy dedication rolling off at the end of next year too. So the voters will see, the residents will see a slight decrease in the mill levy that's required to pay our debt payments. So that will be nice alongside, if we're asking them to raise their sales taxes, but they're also seeing a decline. There could be some, just ease for the voters in that. It's thinking about paying more taxes in terms of sales tax.
I don't know.
Gotta
what
make
to
a
do,
decision
man.
here, so we gotta cut this list down.
Go for
So,
it.
I mean, like I said, I'll start with the accommodation taxes. I feel like not pursuing those in 26.
I agree.
My only concern is Sundance and being prepared for that and just I'm on board with you because we don't have a hotel. Lodging tax isn't necessary right this moment, except that short-term rental will have an ordinance, I think, coming soonish to discuss short-term rentals, or it's on our work plan, I guess.
On our work.
Yeah, soonish means, it's relevant, relative. But, so I know there's, Superior had a hotel without having that tax, a lodging tax. I wonder if there's something else we could be creative, fees, I don't know, some sort of registry. We're gonna have to look at it somehow because we already hear from residents that they want us to be regulating short-term rentals in the neighborhoods. And I think we have something that's going to incentivize short-term rentals in neighborhoods, and so we should be prepared for that.
I don't disagree, and I see it firsthand. So, it's just I don't know how long or how soon something like that could get into the works where there has to be a process to figure out, who does have these short-term rentals and what staff members are gonna be dedicated to overseeing this and making sure that there's compliance and licensing, and I think there's a lot to it. Maybe.
Correct. Yeah, there are firms that help with that, but it would cost some of the money that would be raised by it as well.
I think where I'm at, subject to more debate, of course, is that we go all in on the current rec center expansion, and we try to use the land that wasn't even in the presentation, and to get that bigger. I think I'm going back to where you were originally. Let's take care of the current one, buy us a little bit of time, and then we can look at the future one. And only do it for the cost of the physical cost, the capital cost to do it all. And that buys us time to either come back in 27 or 28 with the broader tax for a second facility, once you have more time to study that.
And laws.
And pay them off?
No,
laws. Oh, and laws, right, I'm getting to that. Yes, I think laws would be out, just focus on this so we can get it. And, I think from our community standpoint, they see us investing in town hall, cost a lot of money, right? COPs and other ways. Or not COPs, I forgot how you paid for this, but you found the money, right? It got built. But they see this is a government facility. The police station, they see it as a government facility. I think the recreation center, they'll see it as a government facility, but they'll see it as a community facility. You don't really come down here to hang out for community. You don't really go to the police to hang out for community. No cuts there, but that's just kind of what it is. But you do go to the rec center for community, and I think we need to get a win in the community column to say that this is equally important. And I think that was some of your words right when we started, Luke, that this is not a do we need to, but we have to do this because of the community. And so if we focus on that in this election, and then we study these other items for the future, with the exception of the lodging tax, because I think the lodging tax doesn't really cost us anything. We just need approval to do it. And then if we get the hotel built, it's already in place. And I don't think that would put at risk the rec center.
And so just to be very clear, you're talking about a question about expansion of the ECC and potentially a lodging tax on 2026.
That's right. And everything else would just wait until you guys can come back to us with, I think, better information where we'd have a higher degree of success in educating our community and then having them say, all right, we get it, we need to go there. And then.
So would the sales tax sunset on the expansion?
I think so, on the capital.
Once the bond is paid off.
Once the
Yeah.
bond is
Right.
paid off. You can always go back, and I love what St. Vrain did on their last bond. They said, without raising your taxes, will you support bump, 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 bump? And they got it passed easily.
Yeah.
And I think once they're in place, then we can come back at that time and do the same thing if needed.
And yeah, as we get to the second community campus or the Leoni World Service Center, then we can say, hey, we already have this tax in place, whether we have to increase or maybe it's a small increase, and you get another second community campus and the Leoni World Service in 28, 29, whenever that happens. Just a point of clarification, so when you say all in on the recreation expansion for the 26 ballot, are you looking at the full renovation and expansion or just the expansion? So the fitness facility and the gym and the future town building?
I'm saying the renovation too, so that it doesn't look like old or new.
Yes. The full 27 million scope.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because then it's done. And then we're not trying to hodgepodge it where you start to, people know that you got the old side and the new side, and I think if we can get through that.
And I would even say, if there's 10% more and you can add, add 10% onto the 27 million, and you can add some key features that would buy us some longevity. I mean, I would
So I have
just
one
look at
question.
that too.
Sorry, I thought. Have you finished? Okay. I had one question on the service center. Do we have enough information or do we need to educate people for if we wanted to do 26?
We would need more financial information, more specifics on that one. So we have some pretty high level numbers and not enough, I would think. So that one, if we're gonna do it, could go for 27. As sort of like the new community campus, like we could do a feasibility study and get the information in order for 2027, but I would not say we have enough information for 2026.
Gabby, one thing, or actually maybe this is a question for you, Sarah, but maybe it's Gabby. The tax that is rolling off for the current rec center, do we have like an average? Can we say if you have a $700,000 home, this is what you are paying, and you will no longer be paying that? And so we're asking you to approve this other sales tax.
I could get that number for you. I can back into it. We represent about 11% of the property tax bill, on both sides of the counties. So, roughly 10% off the top of that is probably gonna be what's dedicated towards debt for each individual taxpayer. So again, I'd have to calculate that, but I
Sure.
could get that number.
That'd be part of the messaging.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was I'll just to clarify, it can be part of the education, the outreach. It would not be able to be part of the ballot language because it would be a direct
Right,
swap.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So I'll just say that sounds like very clear direction for 26 unless I have other council members who don't like that.
Let me reiterate, and then if anybody doesn't agree with that general direction, once again, we can't make the decision tonight. It would come back to us in the contract with Polko. It would come back to us in the contract to do the design. So let me summarize, and then if anybody disagrees, let's get it on the table. So we focus the ballot language on two things, the hotel tax and the expansion and renovation of the rec center. The tax would be for the capital costs only, not the operational costs. This would be for the 2026 ballot. The other items would be pushed off to 2027 or further, depending on how information was coming together and what staff brought back to us as the most critical needs. I think that's it.
And Mayor, could I just ask a clarification? You also said, I heard you earlier say you wanted us to look at that additional land as part of the ECC expansion.
I think yes.
Okay.
So when you come back to us with the contract, I think you have to make a judgment call. And I think it goes back to what Councilmember O'Connor was asking earlier. Does it drive down the cost per square foot if we do that expanded space, and then it helps reduce some of the problems we have in the rec center that we can't reduce with the way it is drawn today.
So we are talking about bringing back a contract for that additional work that we discussed
Yes.
just
Yeah, and that's-
previously.
That's gonna be the $1.7 million contract.
Yes, we'll have to make sure that.
Or a little bit more.
Or a
if you
little
go
bit
into
more
the
with the
other-
additional land, but I don't wanna say, I don't anticipate it being too much of an additional cost.
But that's the ballpark.
Yes, that's the ballpark.
All right, I'm just looking around to see if anybody can't live with that direction, knowing that we'll make the final decisions at a
I
council.
I can live with it. I just want to say, I think short-term rental tax feels like a fairly painless possible win. But
Okay, let's talk about that. So I know you wanted it off. I think Councilmember Rivera was talking about maybe we should do it. I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other because I don't know enough.
Could you repeat your concerns about it?
Basically, so if this tax comes into play, we have to figure out a licensing program for it, who oversees it, collection. And to me, if we have to get the list down, that just seemed one that we could delay. Because I think the tax collected, I could be wrong, but I think the tax collected will not be that much. And we will be paying for administrative fees or somehow through.
That, it's correct. We do not currently collect our own sales tax. We do that through the state. So if we were to collect any of our own taxes, we would have to figure out how to administer that, so.
And I will say, as part of the UDC update that the planning and development team is gonna be bringing forward later this summer, they are talking about the process and the code for licensing and whatnot. And Sarah Nurmela, the Director of Planning and Development, did talk about wanting to start tracking the short-term rentals sooner rather than later to try to get some information, get that data. So in my estimation, it might be a good one for 27, so we have more of our process in place, but I know Julian had thoughts on it as well, from the Sundance and kind of economic perspective of that. But I do know that there's just, yes, to your point, there's not the process in place. We don't necessarily have the staff in place. We don't have the data for what this lift really would be. But we certainly could and will by the end of 26. So for 27, that might be a really good option.
And there are not many short-term rentals like in Boulder or some other places. It's very few. I know this because one of my friends was looking for a short-term rental.
Oh, good, had trouble finding her.
All right, I think you have direction now. We'll leave that one, the short-term rental tax out of it, and we'll revisit it. Other clarifying questions?
So I just want to make sure, because of the timelines that we have for education and outreach, I would like some sort of direction on 2027, more specifically than all the rest of them. Because we would like to know which feasibility studies do we need to get started on now in order to be prepared for education and outreach for the next cycle, and which ones do we not think so. So for example, I don't think there will need to be an extensive education and outreach for the short-term rentals tax in particular, because to your point, it's probably not going to hit many of our residents, right? But for the second community campus, that's going to need some massive education and outreach in order to get that passed. So that one, if we're saying yes for 27, like we need to get moving on a feasibility study, we need to get moving on things. So there were quite a few things we did not even touch in here, in particular under the long-term revenue sources, of which if we are going to think about them for 2027, we would need to know that to get information prepared over the next, 6-9 months, and then come back to you.
So I'll speak to both of these items, the second community campus. As I've mentioned, I think now probably ad nauseum for my own personal purposes, we are bringing a contract for the feasibility study for the second community campus in February. That was supposed to be done by August in preparation for a potential 2026 ballot. So I'm actually relieved that now we have a little bit of time. We don't have to rush that. So that will be done by the end of 2026, and we'll have a lot of good information. We'll have done a lot of the outreach. with community, with stakeholder groups on that campus. Because we are also doing a cost of operations, our cost recovery, our financial stewardship model, and along with the second community campus, doing the operations and maintenance of that campus, we could have a number of where we needed to be for an operations and maintenance tax for Erie indoor operations and maintenance that we could back in.
Yeah, and I think I go back to what is our increase in sales tax and can we absorb it, right? Those operational tax questions are harder to get across.
I would jump in on that and say our 5-year forecast showed we barely had enough to maintain our existing operations. So I don't think we're flush with cash to be able to do that, based on what we currently know.
That 5% year over year keeps up right along our operating increases year over year with inflation.
And that's assuming existing space with existing staff.
Exactly, yes.
And so, I mean, I won't go down the other paths right now, but there may come a time where we just need to look holistically at the system and ask, are there things we're doing that we can dial back a little bit? And, right, that's a whole another deep dive conversation. So Gabby, I don't know what to tell you. 2027, I think for me, laws and the second campus are the two biggies. And then all these other ones, I'm just not sure. We'll have a slightly different council up here at that time. So I also, we got to go through, and the folks making the decision at the time will ultimately have to make that decision.
Yeah, I'll throw in, transportation, infrastructure tax. I know everyone's super excited about that one, but I think it would be great to know what the community thinks about, maybe at the outreach time they've been using the B or they've had access to the B that hopefully is connecting them with other communities, and that begins to sort of open their eyes to multimodal travel and what's possible. Erie is part of a e-bike exchange. And so we're hoping to kind of expand to that. So I don't know if 2027 is the time where we kind of wait for these things to really get established and then maybe look at it in 28 or something. But I do know there's a lot of exciting things on the transportation front that we should look at how we're going to fund those and ensure access for our community. So,
and I think even just having the direction for us to start closely tracking those sorts of metrics is helpful. Like for us to know, coming up either 27, 28, we want to really talk about a transportation related tax. We need to know these things and how they've changed over time. I think that's helpful for staff to know. And because that's not a facility that would need to be as specific, I think we're not gonna need a feasibility study necessarily for that in the same way that we do for our community campus. So I think that's good enough direction if you all agree that we should be tracking transportation and what the community thinks about it.
I think that was the number one issue on the survey, transportation issue or traffic and congestion and all that. Which then begs the question, could we ask the second question under the transportation infrastructure tax on 26, which, if I understand this right, to understand the support or opposition to having a fee, right? Where you don't have to go through the Tabor process, but people get upset at fees too.
Yep.
Every time I register my car and I see whatever it is, the 10 fees, I'm like, just put it into the whole thing, right? I'll pay for the bridges, but you don't have to tell me every time.
Yeah, and I will say there was quite a bit of pushback in the city of Boulder for adding the fee without extensive education and outreach, in particular for the commercial vendors and businesses in the city, because they're hit with a much higher fee than the residents are. So I would say that education is definitely necessary. Simply from a PR perspective, we need to have that conversation about what a fee could look like and how much.
So we should leave it off for 2026?
Well, so I would have a question for you. So yes, of course, there is always value in having statistically valid polling and surveys. For a question like this, there is also the opportunity to have a less strict, less statistically valid survey and ask the question and get a general sense back. And then later go and ask the more statistically valid version and pay the vendor to do that. So we do have the option of doing a Survey Monkey poll and just asking those questions and getting a general
All right,
sense
let's-
now and then seeing which direction it starts
Let's
to
do
push us.
that. And
That's
leave-
okay.
And leave the Polco very specific to the items we just discussed.
Right. And that's perfectly acceptable, and I'll make sure I kind of space them out so that it's not confusing that we're not asking valid questions in two different places. But I think it could help us decide, okay, do we actually wanna go down the route of a tax instead of a fee, or is the fee a more palatable space for the residents and businesses?
Okay, I think you have general direction. Certainly for 2026, you've got a little bit for 2027, but that'll have to come back in the future.
No, I think that's helpful.
All right, well, thanks for hanging in there with us, and I think these conversations are important because it certainly shifted a little bit from where I came in. I'm a little disappointed that I can't go after the big kahuna for everything, but I understand the reasons behind that.
There'll be plenty of kahunas to go after.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is 2026-55, discussion of council rules and procedures, council codes of ethics, conduct, and virtual meeting policy. Welcome to the tables here, Meredith. You've been waiting patiently.
No, everybody left. Everybody else had other people. Just all by
I need to
myself.
come sit by you, and it does kind of feel like us and them.
Question is, where's your people?
People, apparently. I am gonna mention, since we're roughly at the time we were hoping this item would be done, and we're just starting it, this item is not time sensitive, and I know you have outside counsel here for your next item, and if you'd like to consider postponing it, we can do that.
Yeah, so I'm looking to our town manager, and if you're okay doing that, I think that's probably a wise question.
Sorry.
To postpone this top, Meredith was saying this is not time sensitive, so we can postpone to a time in the future to allow us to get on with the next discussion because we are paying consultants to be here.
Works for me.
I'm a lot cheaper than they are, so I can come back.
Does anybody disagree with that? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we're gonna adjourn this meeting and we're gonna start another meeting, which will require us to do a roll call vote and the whole 9 yards. So let me get the agenda up
Just a
here.
second so I can start the new Zoom meeting here.
The other agenda up, so.
Yeah, I just got it up here. All right, I'm gonna call to order the, okay, yeah, you need to get there.
I need to get a Zoom. That was, hold on.
Is this the tool you're working to replace?
No, this is the other part. This is just for the recordings. Let's see, our meeting in the queue. Hold on just a second. Yeah, I'm saving you so much time, aren't I?
It's okay, we lost 2 council members, so no, I want to wait until they get back.
Zoom is taking its sweet time here. Okay.
Is this what Debbie is sometimes waiting for?
Yeah. Let's start whenever Councilmember Morales back.
Can we just take roll by hand?
Yep.
All right, sounds good. All right, I'm going to call to order the town council meeting on January 20th, 2026. This is a special meeting. Will you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, will the town clerk please take roll?
Mayor Pro Tem Bell,
Here?
Councilmember Mortellaro,
Here.
Councilmember Morale,
Present.
Councilmember Baer,
Present.
Councilmember O'Connor,
Present.
Councilmember Hoback,
Here.
Mayor Moore.
Here. All right, and it looks like we have a quorum. Do we have a motion to approve the one item on the agenda tonight?
So moved.
Second. We have a motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, we have an agenda. Do we have any public comment tonight? We absolutely have 0 public in the audience. Is there anybody online?
No.
All right, with that, I will look to the Mayor Pro Tem to make a motion to take us into executive session.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to go into executive session to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, develop a strategy for negotiations, and/or instruct negotiators pursuant to CRS 24640224E, and to consider the purchase, acquisition, lease, or transfer or sale of real, personal, or other property pursuant to CRS 24640224A, for which the topic cannot be disclosed without compromising the purpose of executive session.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, we have a motion and a second. It was approved. We're going into executive session. We will adjourn after executive session and not come back out here afterwards.